Well, good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. Say go. Welcome to 2024 and our new and improved meeting time. We're going to start this meeting with a moment of personal reflection. Thank you. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee peoples, the Mohawks of Akwesasne, the original keepers of this land. As settlers, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Councillor Garner, will you please lead us in the singing of our national anthem?
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras sait porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Son histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. So as we enter into 2024 and we are under our new procedural bylaw, we've added some new sections to our meeting format. One of these is the mayor's update and address. So I want to take this opportunity to start off by recognizing the 2022-23 St. Joseph Secondary School girls curling team. You can see their photo, their image up on the screens. So a little bit of a background. They finished second at OFSA and they brought silver back to Cornwall. So on December 22nd of 2023, we were able to have these impressive young women sign the Book of Acknowledgements at the Cornwall Curling Center when they were back home visiting their families in our community for Christmas break. The recognition was a little overdue. They left for school before we could get them all together prior to leaving, but it was fortunate to get them together before Christmas so we could recognize their outstanding achievement in sports, and they represented our community very well. So I'll just ask maybe we give a round of applause to these ambassadors. Thank you. I also want to take a quick moment to touch on the state of the city. There are two presentations tonight from Mr. Fleury and Ms. Wells that will touch on some of the points in more detail, so I'll try to avoid repetition as I speak. I'd like to equate the four-year term as a house. We're trying to build something that is to be ready as soon as possible. We have a 4-year deadline, and we're hoping that the house we build can last for many years, despite who's living there in the future. In this first year, we're really just pouring the foundation. Much of the work that we've accomplished is meant to help us succeed further down the road. This includes the hiring of our new CAO. While Mr. Fleury will provide you with some of the accomplishments he helped us achieve in the 4 months or so that he's been on board, I will touch on a few themes that are overarching. This year saw the city establish the first municipal shelter-type solution in the city's history. There are, of course, nonprofit shelters, and we do have temporary accommodation options, but the Stepping Stone project represents the first, step forward in a new plan. The Massey Place location will be the next step along this path and will provide us with a more permanent solution. This was no easy feat, and we are getting positive feedback on these efforts. I want to again thank our partners at the United Way and the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, as well as our staffs from our Human Services Department. We also recruited a new medical student earlier last year and are continuing our efforts to recruit more. This council further approved the Arts Center, which will fill a much needed gap in our community. We are trying to highlight our residents and businesses and engage with them more frequently and in more meaningful ways. We've had one town hall with another coming up for budget. I've had 2 roundtable meetings with downtown businesses and we'll be meeting with Le Village BIA shortly. Now I want to loop back to the foundation I mentioned earlier. Council's developed a new strategic plan, and I personally feel as though this was the best strategic planning process that I've had the opportunity to participate in my 3 terms. Maybe I'm biased, of course, but it felt more natural, more focused to me than the previous 2. And there is a lot of work going on in the background, which doesn't necessarily draw headlines, but this work remains important nonetheless. We are undertaking numerous changes to our internal procedures, including our procedural bylaw, expenses policy, corporate communications, amongst many others. Now, while these may seem like minor changes, they will enable us to become more efficient and reduce unnecessary waste, which will reduce costs over time. We're also continuing our work to restore and improve our relationships with our employees at every level and working to shift the culture of the corporation. Some steps have been taken, and more will follow. In the past, I've also talked about the need to improve our lobbying of higher levels of government. We are certainly making progress in this regard. Over the past year, we've had the opportunity to meet with 3 federal cabinet ministers, 6 provincial cabinet ministers, and engage with a number of MPs and MPPs. These interactions matter in order to obtain funding and other considerations for the municipality. There's also further work going on behind the scenes to attempt to attract new investment and new high-skilled jobs and opportunities to the city. But these discussions are very preliminary, and unfortunately I cannot give specifics at this time. If all goes well, these will be announced in the near future. Again, I will look to my house analogy one last time. Building takes time. It's not an immediate process. These days, there's an expectation of immediate change in results, but this is not a reality. However, we have a lot of opportunities available to us today that we did not have as recently as 2 years ago. We'll continue to pursue and complete this work. Thank you. Have the roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Justin Towndale.
Present.
Councillors Claude McIntosh. Dean Hollingsworth.
Present.
Councillors Sarah Good. Present. Caroline Hébert. Present. Elaine McDonald. Present. Councillor Sid Gardner.
Here.
Denis Sabourin.
Present.
Todd Bennett.
Present.
And Fran Guncho. Councillor Dupez sends his regrets, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda? Okay. Madam Clerk, do you have any?
I do not, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
Communication items?
We have none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening, please? Councillor Gardner, Councillor Bennett, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Any pecuniary interests? Councillor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one. I will declare interest for the Tourism Development Fund presentation as the Social Development Council has received and plans to reapply for funds to host Cornwall Culture Fest again next year.
Okay, thank you. Any further declarations? Seeing none. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the special meeting of council of Monday, December 4th and the regular council meeting of council, of Monday, December 11th as presented? Councillor Bennett, Councillor McIntosh, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Presentations and delegations.
We have 2 this evening, Mr. Mayor. Our first one is the Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network Annual Update, and here to present is Mr. Louis Bellin.
Welcome back to council.
That one?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm very humbled and grateful to be the first presentation this year. This is quite exciting. Am I able to switch the slides, or you do it? Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. President, council members, for having me tonight. The Agri-Food Network, as you know, exists to support the development, growth, and sustainability of local farming and food initiatives throughout Prescott Russell, SDG, and the City of Cornwall and the Ontario portion of Akwesasne. Our previous agreement was for 3-year funding with the City of Cornwall, as well as with the other municipalities, and through that we have done some absolutely amazing work that I look forward to telling you about tonight. Next slide, please. One of the exercises we've done recently with our board is kind of defining that why. And there's a big list there, but really it all comes down to a greater impact, a stronger voice, and a wider reach for our local producers. And we certainly accomplished that, and it's something we're quite proud of. In terms of numbers, so I'll go through two different sets of numbers here. For the Agri-Food Network, which is really our traditional brand and our internal things, we have 155 active members across the 4 regions. We've hosted 10 events throughout the past year. We've attended 17 partner events, 5 corporate presentations, and that's a direct reach of 2,500 people. So that's people we've spoken to and who've had a direct conversation with us about the network and what we do. It does come out to over $130,000 invested in our community. That's spending dollars directly in local producers and local businesses. Last year, we launched our local food brand, Savour East Ontario. I hope that some of you have seen it out and about. We were very involved in the community. But that's really the marketing arm of the Agri-Food Network. That's the platform we use to promote our local producers, our local members. Through that brand, we have 82 member profiles on our new website with over 28,000 visits. This was launched end of March, so that's not quite a year. We've published 57 videos on YouTube. These are profiles to promote individual members. They are 2 to 3 minutes, and they really tell the story of who these producers are. We had a partnership with GoFM on the Francophone side. We had 988 commercials, 13 live segments. They were 10 to 15 minutes long, where we sat down in studio with the hosts and we talked about a particular producer 13 times. 40,000 active listeners for those. And you see a little bit of our socials there, which are continuously growing. And one thing that was really impactful is we distributed over 3,500 reusable food wraps. So hopefully some of you managed to get your hands on them. We have a whole new idea for next year, for this coming year, for promotion. In terms of the City of Cornwall in and of itself, this is our newest member. I imagine most of you recognize Bill at Happy Popcorn Company. Very exciting to have them on board. They're going to get a video as well. I think it's already filmed. So it's really, we're putting our members front and center, and we're promoting them in a very positive way. Next slide, please. So in terms of our objectives for this coming year, it really boils down to 3 things. We're going to continue marketing our producers with the new platform. We also launched a micro website platform that our members can access, where we can create a digital component to the visitor experience. So it does touch on tourism, but it's really about creating that extra experience when people visit our producers. We do want to launch a training platform, so we applied to multiple funding sources, including the Trillium Foundation, to create a training platform. So this is really module-based, and we're looking at climate resilient farming practices. We're looking at digital marketing, e-commerce trainings, really accessible modules for our businesses and producers that they can access and get that extra little bit of help for their business. And we do want to have an events platform, so it combines both. I say a platform, it's more of a plan. So both our own events that we organize throughout the year and supporting community events in the agri-food sector. So that's the plan for 2024. We really look forward to it. We have a lot of exciting things coming along. I think that was the last slide. All in all, I mean, we've just finished our 3-year funding agreement, and I'm extremely grateful. This is just a very quick overview of what we've done, but I'm really appreciative of Councillor Good's participation as well on our board. She can probably attest to a lot more of the work that we've done as well, but very, very appreciative and very grateful for the funding we've received in the past 3 years. And we will be applying through the new process for some more funding for this year as well. our two other municipal partners have, I will say, they have upped the ante a little bit. We did ask for a little bit more money than the previous years, but hopefully we'll get that through. But lots of good things coming for 2024 for the Agri-Food Network and for our producers and members. And again, thank you so much for your support in the past couple of years. Very, very grateful for that. And I wish you all a very wonderful 2024. I am open to questions if there are any.
Thank you for the presentation. Just before we go to questions, just get a motion to receive the presentation, please. Councillor Good, Councillor Bennett. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Ngunjo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for the job you're doing. I have just a quick question for you. I would like to know what role do you think the city of Cornwall could play in promoting access to and consumption of our local product?
Thank you. That's a very good question, and I could speak a very long time as to that. I think as we know, the city of Cornwall is a little is more urban, and I think where I see the role and where we're trying to we are putting a lot of work into this. Is we have such amazing products being grown just outside city limits. And I firmly believe that Cornwall has a reputation of being an industrial city, but to me, it's a food city. It really is. The restaurants that are here in Cornwall are absolutely out of this world. And I think that I'd like to see those restaurants leveraged, and they already do use a lot of local food, a lot of local products. And so we just need to highlight that. And as a city and as a region, those plates are how we get to people's hearts. That's how we showcase local food, and the entire sector is through those plates and that service. So I think that's where Cornwall plays a key role in the region. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I would like to know if you're considering establishing partnerships with major grocery retailers in Cornwall.
Yes, thank you for the question. We would love to. One of the key partnerships we're looking at that I'm working on right now actually is with the Chamber of Commerce to grow our membership base and to have access to larger businesses that can leverage that. Larger food chains and grocery stores are a little bit tricky. It depends the franchise ownership and whatnot. I'm not 100% familiar with all the grocery stores in Cornwall. I'll be honest, I'm not from here, but we do have a few partnerships with Metro's, Foodlands, and those types of grocery stores as well that we would love to look at. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your answers. Good for me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. So yes, you're right. We're an urban center, but we love our markets. So I'm assuming, I've never looked for your logo at, say, the Kinsman Market, which is probably the one I go to most often. So do all your member producers sport the logo if they are set up somewhere?
We are getting there.
Okay.
We are getting there. The brand was launched just this past March, so it is a time-consuming process. It is a lot of work, and the producers, they are small businesses that don't necessarily have the knowledge to run a business either. They're not focused on the business side. They're focused on the growing or the producing.
Okay, yeah.
And so there is quite a bit of hand-holding. So it's a longer process than I'd like. I'd like to just be able to say, yes, they all have our logo, but it is coming along very well.
So they probably don't, many of them have direct interface with the customers. Like they're probably the producers, but somebody else is selling their product then. Like you've probably got different categories of members.
It's really varied. Yes, absolutely. We have quite a few that do direct sales to consumers because that's where the most profit is. But we do have quite a few that do distribution, and any kind of distribution model is available and works. It really depends the member.
Good. And I have to say that, thanks for giving a shout out to the grocery stores that you're aware of that sell locally produced products. But for example, one that I go to very often in Cornwall, your independent grocer, it usually has a table of locally produced goods before you hit the, the formal year-long stable displays.
Yeah.
They have extra tables out of locally produced produce, so we're catching on.
Thank you. And I am 100% open to any connections if people know owners and operators of grocery stores and they think that there'd be value in this. A quick email, a quick introduction. I'm
Yeah,
not
well,
mentioning any names.
There are probably other grocery stores out there that do sell them as well. I'm sorry, I just mentioned one, but if other people know others, they should all get a shout out. Thank you.
100%. Thank you.
Well, if we hear of anyone, I'm sure we'll let you know. Councillor Good.
Oh, thank you so much. Through you, Mr. Mayor. That was excellent. Top-notch humor. It's been a pleasure to be on the board for the last 9 months or so, and this is definitely a cause that I support dearly. Food is so essential to our lives, and supporting our local food is important from a climate perspective, from a health perspective, from an economic perspective. And, I appreciate that while we live in an urban center, we benefit from the hard work that goes into producing and processing our food and bringing it ultimately on our table. So I am also happy as an urbanite to see the kind of pivot and transition to be more inclusive of restaurants and groceries, stores, so that we will be able to see a greater benefit of what this membership really can offer us. And I know that the Cornwall membership is currently growing, so I'm happy to see that Bill and Kristen from the Happy Popcorn have been onboarded, and Louis and I have had some conversations about how we can make it even more attractive to some of our more urban producers and retailers, and there are people producing food right here in Cornwall, albeit on a small scale. So this is great. I'm happy to see the small summary and look forward to seeing this get brought to budget. So thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
Further comments, questions? Councillor McIntosh.
Just in case you wonder why we were laughing, Councillor Bennett's a manager of a local food store.
Well, we'll be in touch.
Well, now the cat's out of the bag. Any further questions or comments? Okay, again, thank you very much for your presentation. Look forward to continuing our
Thank you, Mr.
partnership.
Mayor, council members, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. All in favor of receiving? It's carried, thank you.
Our second presentation this evening is the Tourism Development Corporation of Cornwall. It's an annual update, and here to present is Mr. Dale Allen, the chair of the board.
And again, welcome back to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Happy New Year to everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to provide a quick presentation of what we're up to in 2023 and what we can expect to do in 2024.
Sorry, Mr. Allen, can I ask you to move the microphone a little bit closer to yourself, please?
Is that better? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I guess we can go to the next slide. So just very quickly, the overview of the corporation. We are a standalone corporation where the City of Cornwall is our only member. The decisions are all made at the discretion of the Board of Directors. We are funded by the municipal accommodation tax that's collected that people reside in hotel rooms, short-term stays in Cornwall. We're required to distribute 20% of our funds on an annual basis, and our sole reason for existing is to support the development of tourism in the City of Cornwall. The board is made up of myself and Etienne Saint-Aubin and Karen Torrey-Racine, who are behind me and supporting me here, so I thank them very much. And then to the right, you see our advisory committee members. And the process works that as a group that applies to us for funding, the application is provided to the advisory committee initially. They review, debate, and provide the board with what their recommendation would be on an awarding of funds basis. And then the board takes their advice to heart and reviews the application ourselves, and then the award is provided to the group. The advisory council are people that, business people with a view, and they more of a tourism lens, where the board of directors isn't involved in tourism as an industry particularly. A few of the key highlights for 2023. The number of applications received increased by 44%. 34 applications were approved for funding, and we awarded a little over $305,000 in grants, which was double from 2022. We have a little over $200,000 in our reserve fund, and our projects contributed to more than 50,000 visitors to the area. I'm thankful for the Economic Development Department to provide that last line in there. So we awarded $305,000, and it's contributed over $8 million to the local economy. So that's a pretty big bang for your buck. That's like more than 25 times. So it's a good program, and it benefits the area significantly. So moving forward, we continue to refine the application process for maximum effectiveness. We will continue to grow the reserve fund to support an anchor tenant, an anchor tourism attraction. We will increase our communication with the public. And the 2023 was the final contribution year to the Arts Center, so we had contributed or committed $100,000 to the Arts Center at $25,000 a year for 4 years. And then just before I finish and stop for questions, the Economic Development Department has been very helpful for us, so I thank Bob Peters and the Tourism Department, Kevin Lajoie, and especially Amy Mallion for their support this year. They've been very helpful as we work through our process. So that's my quick presentation for this year.
Thank you for the presentation. Before we go to questions, just need a motion to receive, please. Councillor Sabri, Councillor Ngunjo, Councillor Gardner.
Well, you talked about the Arts Center at the beginning of the night, Mr. Mayor. So I need to find out how we can continue getting funding from your group.
So they would need to re-up their application. The application that we funded was over 4 years, $100,000.
Yeah.
So that application is behind us, and they would need to reapply to the fund to access more
Okay,
funding.
well, who would we have applying for it?
Sorry, from the Arts Center?
Yeah.
I'm assuming one of the directors, one of the board members.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
It's a needy thing, and
Indeed.
for the city and for our residents and for visitors. So thank you for the
All right.
answer.
Councillor Ngunjo, then Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I would like to thank you for the job you're doing for our community. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As a president of an association working with you. Even that, I have few questions for you.
Certainly.
Please, I would like to know or to get your point of view about our estimation. What do you estimate to be great site in our community to attract tourism in Cornwall?
Sorry, what's our biggest benefit to attract tourism?
Yes, what are the current major tourism attraction sites in Cornwall?
Okay, sure. So off the top of my head, I see Cornwall as having a number of strong tourism assets. Obviously, the waterfront trail is a significant asset, and it continues to grow every year. And the tourism department is accessing that through various programs. I also see the fact that we have significant infrastructure assets here that allow for various sports opportunities. Our weakness right now would be the number of rooms. that are available, although that's increasing. We have the Ramada Inn back online and available to take short-term hotel room stays, and we have the, I think, Hampton Inn and Suites that's available for room rentals as well. But I still think that there's probably a lack of hotel rooms on those big weekends that probably hamper us from getting some of the bigger opportunities within the tourism sector.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And, in your view, should the city of Cornwall to strengthen our tourism potential? What should the city can do to strengthen the potential of our tourism in Cornwall?
So, not being fully versed in where the strategic plan for the tourism department sits, that may be an opportunity to reach out to both the community and the public at large in growing what would be a tourism landscape or vision for the next few years. I would see that that's a real opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So let me thank you again for the $100,000 that your committee gave to the Arts Center. It was a tremendous encouragement and obviously help in what we've done. And as the mayor said previously, the project is on track. We did have a glitch, but we worked through it.
Good.
So you say here that you're obliged to spend 20% of the tax that you get every year. Is that usual, that you would spend so little of the total amount, or?
Well, that's the low end. That's
Okay.
the low end of the bar. We've never gotten there. This year was over $300,000. We only collect $350,000 approximately.
Okay.
So we try to get it all out.
That's what I would have assumed. So, but on the other hand, if you're obliged to only spend 20%, that tells me that you use great discretion in the applications, in reviewing them, and in awarding funds. Obviously, you have criteria.
Yeah, so
And
we have a matrix that we work through, and each application really is seen by 13 sets of eyes.
Yes.
So it gets a very thorough review, and you know, based on the strength of the application, the award is you know, represents what the group
Yeah.
thinks was
Great.
what it was worth.
And it seems to me, when I've seen lists of the organizations that you've supported, they're all over the map.
Correct.
So I think you're out to support organizations that appeal to everybody.
The key is bringing people to Cornwall. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, the other question I have is probably best answered by city administration, maybe by Ms. Bailey, through you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of cities are being challenged to the point that they are trying to regulate the short-term rentals, which in a sense can compete with hotel rentals and that sort of thing. And I'm just wondering if we have experienced any kind of challenge, or do we see that we're losing market share, you know, losing the accommodation tax by people who are using Airbnb and who aren't registering and obviously aren't paying the tax? Is this a threat to us, to our long-term viability of this corporation?
Ms. Bailey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if they are registered through Airbnb, we are collecting the MAT revenue for that.
Oh, good.
But if they are independently renting out a space, we would not be recognizing MAT revenue for that.
Right.
But definitely, yes, for
Okay.
Airbnb, we do.
So I imagine it's a situation we're watching. We'd be advised to. I know we decided not to license rentals a few years ago, but if this ever became, I think, a real threat to our resources that we use for this corporation, I can see we might revisit that just to be able to track the rental dollars in the city. That's all.
Yeah, and I guess my only point is at times people need a place to stay, and they use various options, campgrounds, you know, whatever is available depending on the time of year. But right now, I think that we are a little bit constrained due to the number of hotel rooms available and
Yeah.
Airbnb. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I have Councillor Good, then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for the presentation. I find this a really amazing concept, and it's such a positive feedback loop that, you know, we're bringing revenue in and we're supporting these small businesses that need a little boost, or events that need a boost or a kickstart. I noticed on there you had an increased communication with the public, and I have to say, for myself, even now, still a little muddy. I think I have a better clarity of how everything functions. But what would you say is the message that you want to put out there to the public that you think might be missed?
So I think the key message we need to go forward is very clearly outlining what the fund will do and won't do. There was times where people were applying for the fund, but really what they were looking for was infrastructure support, and that's not what the fund does. It's to bring people to Cornwall. Secondly, to just let people know that the fund exists and to apply. And the odds are, based on the number of awards we've given, you'll probably get a little bit of money. So I would think those are the two key things, and it's certainly something as a board we're going to be spending some time discussing and trying to roll out that communication strategy within the first quarter.
Perfect. And so the municipal accommodation tax that funds this program, it comes exclusively from Cornwall, correct?
Correct. It's Cornwall Hotels.
And the projects that are funded, though, are they throughout?
They're
What is the
throughout-
region? Because I know of a few that have been
Largely throughout the counties in
Yeah.
Akwesasne.
Okay.
Where the project may be big enough that people would be staying. No, I mean, basically, most of the rural areas don't have rooms to rent.
Yeah.
And so the idea is, if there's an opportunity where that event, with our support, could bring hotel room revenue to the city of Cornwall. The best example is the Glengarry Highland Games. It happens out in Maxville, but it sells out hotel rooms in Cornwall all the time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, and that's great. I think it's wonderful. You know, you
Yep.
got to scratch each other's back here and there.
Yep.
And I did want to mention, when I was at the AMO conference in August, I actually stopped at the Airbnb booth, and we are I think we're one of 8 municipalities in all of Ontario that actually has an automatic collection for that municipal accommodation tax. And when I said I was from Cornwall, they were like, "What? You actually have a system set up." So we are the smallest, definitely, and one of the very few. So really interesting that we're able to collect that, love it or hate the
Yep.
short-term rentals. I'm glad we're at least able to profit off it to put it back into the city. So
Yep.
thank you so much for your presentation.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
The reserve fund,
Yep.
so you want to use it to support anchor attractions. Could you explain to me how, to do what?
So we put a percentage of the funds we receive every year into a separate bank account. And the idea is that is available to be tapped into for a significant tourism attraction to the area. So it isn't there to fund Highland Games weekend or that type of thing. It's something that's going to be more significant and permanent to the area. We are open to whatever the business community, the not-for-profit community wants to bring forward, and we'll receive it. But we continue to put money aside so that perhaps if there's an opportunity for something coming, this might be just a little bit more to bring it over the line, that they want to come to Cornwall as opposed to somewhere else. So that's what it's there for. But as far as a definition of what an anchor attraction should be, that's not defined. It's going to be something significant, and it's going to be permanent.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So if somebody wanted to start a lift-off again, that would be considered an anchor attraction, I would assume?
That would be something that we'd
Yeah.
certainly entertain. Yep.
Okay, so all those out there want to start another festival?
Yep.
Please get in contact.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Councillor Bennett. Sorry, Councillor Sabre, correction. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you for the presentation. Good to see you once again.
Yeah.
I take note of the comments with regards to the communications and getting the recognition that I think is due, because there is an awful lot that goes behind it. I've attended a number of the events where I know there was some of the money there, but I'm not seeing any acknowledgement in the programs or even on the advertising or the bulletins with regards to the various events. Is that something that they're missing, or is that, I thought that was part of a criteria that they had
Yeah,
to?
so certainly when it's awarded, they're there to recognize the tourism fund as a funder of the event. We have, logos and all that we provide to them. And then we also have even flags that could go up at an event. But I would say that's if anything, it's probably something that we could be a little bit more diligent on in ensuring that that happens. Unfortunately, much of the printed material happens after the fact, and we only see the result of the printed material. But I think it's something we need to reinforce when we award the money to the various groups.
Okay. Would I be stealing anybody's thunder if I asked, like, there's a big event coming into Cornwall this June that's about a 240 years in the making. Then, is there any support from the fund for that, or has there been an application? Or
So we have, let me just check to see. There's one, so the United Empire Loyalists, is that the one you're talking about?
Johnstown anniversary.
No, the Johnstown anniversary hasn't applied yet. They will be. Yeah.
Councillor McIntosh.
First of all, I want to thank whoever put these screens up. It's getting third-degree whiplash trying to look at that. Anyhow, yeah, the accommodations were a challenge, weren't they? When the Deb was, I know my wife was involved in a reunion and she had to cancel it because they had booked Deb and Deb notified them.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
unfortunate.
Anyway, so they had trouble finding a place. How do you track these things? Like you talked about the number of visitors who come here and the money that's left here.
Yeah.
I'm just always curious how these things are tracked.
So a couple of ways. One is we withhold, you apply to us for some funding, we say you can have your $10,000. Initially, we'll cut you a check for $9,000, and then there's another $1,000 that you have to give us the follow-up report to before we release the final amount. In that follow-up report, there's a number of questions we ask, including how many people attended your event, what was the estimate, how many were out-of-town people, how many were local people, how many were more than 40 kilometers away. So we ask we try to get into a little bit of the details on that type of information so we can track that through the follow-up reports. There's also a program through the Province of Ontario Tourism Department called TRIM, T-R-I-M-M, and you can put in what your program does or what your event does, and it will spit out some statistical analysis of, well, you left this, this much money was provided to economically in the area based on what you did. Yeah. And so I'm assuming that some of the facts here would be based on our follow-up reports, and some of the information would have been through the TRIM model.
Okay. I'm glad you explained that it's not just city events.
No, it is.
You go outside.
SD&G and Aqua
I had some cranky seniors pull my ear on outside agency getting some funding in South Stormont.
Okay.
They said, why are we giving taxpayers money? And that was another fallacy. It's not taxpayers' money. So you explain these things, and you explain them that it's coming from the hotels, not from the taxpayers, which is good. And I was going to ask you about the Anchor event,
Attraction.
but somebody asked. I mean, Etienne mentioned that a couple of years ago, that you were looking for a major, major event.
We're open to whatever can come to the area, but at this point, nothing's been brought to us, so we just continue to put money aside, and as it grows, hopefully it becomes I guess a bigger feather or a bigger opportunity to sway the group to perhaps come to Cornwall as opposed to somewhere else.
Okay, this was long overdue. Other cities had this long before us. And,
yes.
Anyway, it's good. It's a great program, and it's well run. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Gardner.
I asked about the Art Center, but initially, when this program came on, the province made it available, it wasn't controlled. And so at one point, after they put it out, they stopped the program. I was devastated by that because I knew the money that was coming in. But I was also aware that there were some nefarious things going on. And I think it's kudos to your people and to you that you have control of that money now. At one point, some municipalities weren't spending the money properly. So I thank you and your people for working under the regulations that we have and controlling the money and make sure it comes back to tourism in Cornwall. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Appreciate the kind words.
Any further comments? Again, thank you very much for your presentation, and also look forward to continuing our partnership. All in favor of receiving? Carried, thank you.
Can you stop sharing? We were all sharing. Okay, for the bulk consent reports, we have one report, tender 23T55, supply of tractor-mounted backhoe, tractor-mounted hoe ram, or tractor-mounted backhoe with ROHAM, complete with operator for various city departments. The action recommended is that this tender be awarded on a roster basis from February 1st, 2024 to January 31st, 2025. Suppliers will be called in order of the various rosters.
Motion? Councillor McDonald, Councillor Bennett. All in favor? Carried, thank you.
We have no reports from inquiries this evening, Mr. Mayor. So moving on to action reports. Our first one is the 2023 accomplishments. And the motion recommended is that council receive this report.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of council and the public. Je vous souhaite à tous et à toutes une belle année 2024. As you can see by the next three reports in front of you, this one that I'll be speaking on in just a minute is about your last year. I can't take credit for any of it. I joined you at the last part of the year, but on behalf of the senior management team and the work of council, I think it is important to recognize the efforts of the last year. And I think it also, it's an important reflection on where we're going and elements that we've been able to work collaboratively on. What you'll hear after is a summary of your work relating to the recent retreat, which was last November. And then based on that, you'll hear our priorities for this coming year in terms of the public service. And obviously, I should start and preface by saying we are on est un reflet des décisions qui sont prises au niveau du Conseil. Donc, on reconnaît évidemment qu'il va y avoir la période budgétaire dans quelques semaines qui pourrait aussi modifier certaines des priorités qui sont soulignées ce soir. So I'd like to start with, I hope that everyone can see the screen, and I want to begin by recognizing that a lot of work and accomplishments that happen in our city happen without us never noticing it. Last time we met in this room, there was screens around and we weren't able to have all the visuals and be set up as we are, and that's because of the work of Louis and the IT team. And that's the type of accomplishments that are ongoing, often unnoticed, but much appreciated. And I want to personally thank Louis and the entire team for pulling this through in our first council of the year. So as we take a look back at last year, I think it is important for us to have an eye on what's happening in our workforce. We are a large employer, probably the largest employer in the city, and we've had retirements, new hires. It's important to know where we want to go and the age of our workforce. How can we support them and so on? And I see a lot of opportunities there. You'll see that as we continue on the three presentations. EDI work began last year based on the leadership of a city council. Ce qui est intéressant, puis qu'on fait un recul, on revoit évidemment qu'il y a un reflet de la ville qui se transforme. Puis que le conseil municipal est très sensible et aux besoins de la communauté et aussi aux besoins de l'organisation de la ville comme telle. I want to commend there's members across the organizations in all service areas who are participating in the EDI committee. And that, I think, is empowering. It's powerful, both from an employer perspective, but also in celebrating the diversity and inclusivity of our city. We wouldn't be a city without talking about infrastructure, particularly roads. There's been a number of infrastructure projects, and obviously, as I highlight this, I'm not going around and mentioning all the senior management team that's being able to pull all of this important work, that it be from the tendering processes to purchasing to the oversight of the functions to the payments and so on. So it's a full team effort in all of those areas. Obviously, this last year, when we think of road reconstruction, and this is only partial of the work, but you think of Sydney Street, you think of Aberdeen, think of Joyce Street, 5th Street, McConnell, Guy. There's a number of road infrastructure, road renewal projects that have happened in the last year, and always difficult through the construction, but once it's completed, it looks great. It looks good, and is a marquee investment for a generation, right? The next 10, 20, 50 years are for the public to benefit. Évidemment, comme ville, on attribue beaucoup d'argent, puis on est attributaire aux efforts communautaires. Puis beaucoup des membres du conseil, mais de l'ensemble de la communauté, collaborent de façon rapprochée avec des organisations à but non lucratif dans la communauté. Centraide, Centre 105, Agape, Optimist Club, the Social Development Council, and on. And I think that's we see it. I hear it from council. I see it in the community, and I see it from a senior team member how important that is to the social fabric and the community implication of those community-led initiatives. I'll go to the next slide. Whoop. One of the elements that you'll see me use often, but I want to explain it, is modern government. And what I mean by that is our agility, our ability to be agile, to be responsive, to continue to strive to improve, that it'd be leveraging technology, that it'd be to meet new governance objectives. So over the last year, obviously late in the year, the new procedural bylaw, which was highlighted by the mayor, we're seeing it tonight, the first agenda item, which we will build on, and obviously a lot of continued work this year, which I'll highlight later. The interim control bylaw that was in place and the work of senior staff and council and the mayor, particularly on that matter, and the study that's ongoing. The archaeological plan, obviously, Jamie and his team, and making sure we're supporting the proper development industry and the process relating to the sites. That important collaboration, independence, but collaboration with the development industry is important for the future of the city. And we just talked about the screens to just showcase, but IT is essential. It's a central part of our ability as public service to do our functions, to conduct our work, to serve the public, and obviously to serve council. Next slide. A lot of infrastructure and construction have begun. As you're well aware, the fire headquarters, and I'm told by the chief that by 2025, all will be operational. So it's an important year this year in terms of construction, but it began in 2023. The backbones of our city relies heavily, as you know, by the sewer and water budgets that you recently passed on our underground infrastructure, and having those investments in the water mains and the sewer in the water in our plants is so valuable. Sometimes it goes unnoticed, but the approvals and the work that goes in for council approval relating to plans like the Climate Action Plan and the Climate Adaptation Plan are important rooted initiatives that allow us to advance some key strategies and key investments in years to come. And you'll see that as we present later this month the budget. And then an important milestone for the community. We don't have the final numbers. Michael and I were speaking earlier, but close to 1 million passengers this last year on your transit service. That commends the work, right, of having transit available on time, making sure it's affordable, but also the pride of our employees who deliver the service throughout the year. And I know that as I go to looking forward, there's an important year for transit and engagement with the public on that. Next slide. On the housing front, the opening of 9th Street, 77 bachelor units, marquee investment in affordable housing in our city. I'm amazed by the work of the housing team in putting in place the winter housing strategy based on an emerging situations that we faced as a community that many cities across the country are facing as it relates to encampment, as it relates to affordability of housing. So those three initiatives that you're seeing on the screen and the foresight of council to purchase Massey Place, I think those are good indicators on 3 points of some of the longer term strategies, of some of the immediate response, and some of the tactical purchases that allow us as a city to capture the point in time and the type of work we need to do to respond to some of the housing pressures. I think, unless I'm wrong, I think that, there's one more slide. Obviously, although delayed and not as far as we want it to be, I want to highlight the start of construction at the Arts Center and upgrades to a number of parks, particularly Parc Optimus, Parc Memorial, who both saw some playground improvements, and Matisse outdoor pool work that's begun. I've seen the frame, and apologize, sometimes the French and English back and forth capture those moments of Matisse and Matisse. Yes. And then finally, sometimes it's partial initiatives when we think of building a new pathway. And this new pathway is, you'll say, only 500 meters, but as you build out 500 meters, you connect an entire city with multi-use pathways, and that's important new pathways between Edgar and all the way to Pitt. So I could go on. There's hundreds. When Katie and I were going through, and senior management team were going through the accomplishments, we probably could spend the entire evening speaking of decisions of council, accomplishments in the community. You're noticing there's nothing on the finance, but everything is related to finance. There's nothing about IT, but everything's related to IT. There's nothing about procurement, but everything's tied in. So, our obligations are wide-ranging. I wanted to give confidence to council of the work that you've accomplished, that senior management team has been able to accomplish this last year. This, by no sense of the word, is meant to capture all of it, but it's meant to give you a sense of the type of accomplishments we can be proud of, we can showcase, and also bring context. Some of the infrastructure work that we do takes more than a year. So we begin it in a particular year. Some, like the Arts Center, for example, a lot of work that by many years by senior team and community leadership and members of council, which led to the ability to get to a construction phase. And now we're in that period, and we all want to be part of the audience when it will open, and hopefully we can get back on track relating to some of those timelines, for example. So, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation on the 2023 accomplishments, and I would want to finish by really thanking their entire senior management team who've been able to deliver on the accomplishments and obviously the support of council throughout.
Thank you. Before we go to any questions or comments, motion to receive. Councillor Goodjoe, Councillor Bennett. Questions or comments? Councillor McIntosh?
Yeah, great report, Matthew. It's one of the better reports I've seen around here in a long time. And very positive. It doesn't sound like we're trying to find our way. I think we're well on our way. Anyway, it's great.
Councillor Goodjoe.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to congratulate and express my appreciation to our CEO and staff for their important steps forward. Building upon this success will lead us to a very productive year. So kudos to you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. I was reading the stats you gave us on our employees. You mentioned that 27 people retired and were able to access a workshop and that sort of thing. But when you say we welcome 273 individuals, this doesn't reflect on our employee turnover. Are these new people?
New
And
hires.
are they replacing people who walked away, or what's going on here?
A combination of things. It could be part-time employees that are joining us for seasonal work. It could be replacement retirees. It could be new FTEs. So it's the entire combination of new individuals who've joined the organization this last year.
So they're not necessarily still with us, that it doesn't necessarily mean that 273 people left.
No,
you know,
no.
Short, okay. Because I look forward to the report eventually that we'll get based
From
on
our HR
Councillor
team
Good's
in the first quarter, yes.
request to see just what our staff turnover is. We do want to be the employer of choice, and we have to have the stats that let us know if we have that or not. And my second area of question has to do with the EDI committee. There has been a great deal of interest, as you mentioned, from council. Both, it's come up at meetings and it's come up in emails. And I tell you, I'm really pleased that we've gotten so far, but I'm also feeling like, did I miss a meeting or have I been left out of something? Like, I wish that council had had an opportunity to provide some input into the creation of this committee. Because, I mean, the last definite thing I heard was that we had an application out for a lead to head up our EDI work, and that seemed to be kind of put on hold or something. So where does the lead fit into this committee?
I really see, although both are complementary, both are very separate. As you know, we have an interim general manager of human resources who's conducting a number of reviews and doing an audit of the HR function within the organization. So for the time of the review, it would be premature to advance with the hiring. We don't know what the future of HR will look like at this point within the organization, and we want to all aspects of the function. No one will. I want to reassure everyone, no one will lose their job, but we are looking at how do we need to be set up as an organization from a human resources perspective, and that certainly includes the EDI efforts. But it would have been premature ahead of that review and empowering our new interim GM to conduct his review independently by filling that seat. So it's that piece. In terms of the committee work, the committee is meeting about monthly, and we can certainly endeavor to provide council with the work plan for this for 2024, and also a progress report of what was done this last year. So
Any opportunity for council input?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. It is an internal committee of city staff, so I think as the CAO mentioned, we're developing a work plan for 2024 and seeing what that's going to look like in line with the interim GM's review of what's happening in corporate service. So I think we'll need to take a bit of a robust view at that first, and then see kind of where things progress.
I'd like to give you an example that's an intangible. So after council, senior management teams meets the day after to debrief on council and the action items that are ensuing. One of the elements that we're working on is the skill matrix that we want around our management team and the certifications we want. And one of them is EDI and Indigenous knowledge, and there's official certification. So, who amongst a senior management team will attend the training? Who amongst our managers and supervisors in different areas will as well? So we're having this conversation. We're not waiting on the audit to be completed, and the work of the EDI committee is continuing while the audit is ongoing.
Speaking of audit, are you attempting by survey, hopefully it would be one in which people could self-identify, are you attempting to determine the level of EDI that we have achieved in terms of representation?
One of the short answer is yes. One of the interim GM's priorities for this year, and you'll see that in my next report, is to conduct a staff survey, an all-staff survey. We have not conducted one in a very long time, which will give us a pulse of the organization, including some of the disclosures that staff might want to share with us as an employer.
for sure, okay? Because I think the hospital and our own police department have done some really significant work in EDI, and I'm glad we're finally organizing to do something. But I'd sure like council to be involved in this as it goes along. I think it'd be important for us to be involved, period. And I guess that's probably it. Thank you.
Just going to go to Chief Stevenson for a second.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McDonald. So, Councillor McDonald, I guess want to be clear, certainly EDI is a priority. That priority and the level of priority that Council has set has not been diminished. We're simply hit a pause button in November just to reevaluate and where our needs are and how we're best suited to manage those needs. We do have Farhana Mehi on contract, 10 hours a week, that is providing EDI services to the city, in addition to the hospital, in addition to Cornwall Police. So she has her time separated between those organizations, and we do have her 10 hours a week. I meet with her weekly. We do, and we do have a priority list, and there are some exciting things that will be coming to the council table that I won't share this evening, but certainly I think all of council will be very pleased with some of the initiatives that we're looking at. So that is kind of the snapshot of where we are sitting right now. And through CAO Fleury, as he advised, certainly can bring an update to council here in the next couple of weeks.
I thank you for that.
Councillor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for this report. It's nice to see the nice things, the good things. We often are stuck in the negative, so it's nice to highlight some good stuff. Just to further some points on the EDI work, we swallow so much information in this role. Sometimes I forget what I dreamt or what is reality. I feel like I'm under the impression that there was a conversation at some point about a mayor's task force on EDI, and that is different than the internal EDI committee. So I think the mayor's task force, if and when that is established, that's where council will have the majority of its input, as far as I'm aware, as I believe it'll be more of a community-driven, sort of a committee of council. Maybe I can ask, I don't know who to ask about that and see where we're at for that specifically. Or maybe I dreamt it. Okay.
You must have.
No, okay.
That was approved.
As you can appreciate, it's one of the first times I've heard about it.
Okay.
What we can do is I'll take it offline with the clerks and obviously the mayor's office and see its status.
Okay, great. And just happy to hear that a census will be happening of our employees. I think that's really like a first step to figure out, like you said, get the pulse of where we are in terms of our diversity and where we need to improve. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Okay. Councillor Gardner, then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't know how to say this, but I've been around for 20 years. And this has got to be the greatest group of administrators that I have ever worked with. And if those don't want to see me at the next polls, I may be there. Because this is a fantastic group. So I'm not asking for anything but the positiveness that's coming out of this table, out of this room. It makes me feel proud to be a city councillor in Cornwall. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I really like this report, and I'm hoping it's going to be an annual thing because I think it's nice to highlight to our residents, the accomplishments that our staff are making, from the CAO all the way up to the people that are just, cleaning our offices and all those things, because those people are providing an essential service to the city. And it's really nice to see something like this highlight, some of the work that's being done. So I think that's fantastic. And I hope this is a yearly report. When we're talking about upgrades to recreational paths and parks and all those wonderful things, One thing that we, as a council, approved last summer, maybe even in the spring, was the new youth space that was supposed to be at Alexandra Park. I'm hoping that'll be on next year's slide to show us, how successful that is. I'm just wondering where that project stands. I was just thinking of it when we were talking about it. It just seems
Point of
like.
interest, I'm just going to walk away for this part of the discussion.
Okay. Okay. I'm just wondering where we're at with that, and like, are we shovel-ready with this thing, or where are we?
Thank you for your question, Counselor. And yes, my plan is to have these reports annually, and you'll see that pending Council's approval of the strategic plan and the impending upcoming operational plan, you will see quarterly reports to show progress and if there are delays. I think it is important element for council to be aware of, engaged on, and for the public to know status of the priority projects. As it relates to Alexander Park and the youth group, the mayor and I did meet with the youth leadership table, is what I can describe them on. They've had quite the journey, and I've discovered that in my conversation with them. They've shared with us their plans, their intentions, which is bigger than a simple phase. I describe as not only in terms of feasibility, but in terms of their funding allocation. So we're awaiting their submission for our team's review for accessibility and maintenance standards to give the go-ahead. So our facilities and recreation and parks team still needs to give the final go-ahead, but in principle, where the status is, we're just awaiting their submission to us.
Okay, I think that's good news to hear. Would like to see that, up and running this summer. I think the youth that are on that group have worked very hard to get to where we're looking at actually building that space. And I've heard some of the plans that they're talking about doing that's a lot bigger, I think, than was originally thought. But I think it's fantastic. So I look forward to seeing that on a slide in that.
Further questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of receiving this presentation? It's carried. Thank you.
The next report on the agenda is the council's strategic priorities, and the action recommended is that council approve this report, adopt the strategies as presented, and direct management to create an implementation report to operationalize the strategies and develop a communication plan to support the strategic plan objectives.
Okay, Ms. Walls?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what council sees in front of them today is a reflection of the strategic priorities session that took place on November 4th. As council will note in the report, this is a two-step approach that we're taking. What is in front of council today is the strategies that we have extracted from the discussion from that session, and what staff has recommended for council to proceed with is operationalizing that those strategies in a subsequent report. So I think what we really did in that session, we had some very robust discussions. Council was certainly very diligent in the roadmap that they want to see. So I think staff are aware of the destination council wants to go, and so what you have in front of you is the roadmap. So let's make sure the map is in line with what council wants to see, and then we will add those destination pieces in the subsequent report. I'm very happy to answer any questions that council may have.
All right, council, any questions? Councillor Bennett.
Not so much a question as a comment. What I liked about this particular report is, so last term we did our strategic priority planning. We had a sheet that just basically had the highlights of what we discussed. But I really liked about this was the add-on report, which was the council democracy results. Because I think if people are going to look at the the bullet points, they get to see what was actually discussed, and all the ideas are going to be, we're going to try and fit into those priorities. So I thought that was a really nice addition to this report, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure the public will appreciate knowing that we just didn't talk about, 4 things on each pillar. We had full, robust conversations. So that was a nice addition to this report, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Ngunjo.
Mr. Mayor, I'm welcoming this helpful report. However, I can't help feeling that many of our priorities are expressed in a rather vague way. I think our citizens might well have a hard time figuring out just what we plan to do. I wonder if we could perhaps be more specific. For instance, in recent months, I have initiated a discussion with the University of Ottawa in order to have post-secondary university program adapted to the need of our community and available in Cornwall. We must slow down the exodus of our youth towards big cities. Several constructive preliminary meetings took place last year, including representatives from the University of Ottawa, the mayor, the director general, Councillor Todd, and myself. In 2024, does the administration plan to continue this process and organize discussion tables with the participation of the president of the University of Ottawa?
Just before we answer, I wonder if the clerk could put up the pillar section. Is that page from the report, page 33? Page 34 on the screen, if possible. Sorry, Councillor, we'll turn it over to Katie.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your comments, Councillor. So what this is a part one report of the entire strategic priorities plan. And what we wanted to do was try and capture the strategies instead of just simply listing a number of points that Council highlighted during their November 4th retreat. So what you will see, Councillor, is on January 22nd, a secondary report, assuming Council does accept this, with those specific points on it. So you mentioned the discussion around the university. That will be reflected in that secondary report. If Council, for example, looked at these pillars and felt, you know what, maybe that's not reflective of what we talked about, we wanted to have that discussion tonight instead of jumping right in with a full, robust plan that maybe Council didn't feel is reflective. So to answer your question, Councillor, those specific points of discussion will be reflected in that secondary report. In terms of the discussion, the more high-level discussion regarding the university that you just mentioned, I think the CAO can probably speak a little bit more to the university component than myself.
Yeah, I think, so a couple of points, and it's interesting, Councillor Bennett was raising it earlier. What we wanted to do was keep the report at a very strategic level. As Katie highlighted, it was very important for us to get an endorsement of those pillars prior to creating the operational plan and the prioritization of each of the project. But we struggled in working strategically in the report with losing sense of the practical elements that were identified through the engagement, through the retreat. So in keeping both of those elements aligned, the strategic aspect and the project-based aspects, we thought that the democracy tapisserie was the way to go, where we highlight some of the conversations on the waterfront, some of the conversations on the university and the importance, a number of initiatives. Housing was top of mind along the way for many of our conversations. So what you're going to see is this report is strategic in nature with the pillars. It has an attached document which speaks to the practicality of the retreat. And then we're going to come back at next council with a yearly operational plan. So at that point, you're going to see, you're seeing a bit this evening with the priorities we're presenting, but you're going to see very tangibly the alignment between the strategic pillar and a deliverable element, and you can evaluate us to that, because then you're going to be able to see, what's our governance around the university and bringing university, who's leading that, what are our milestones, and where should we be by the end of 2024. So if you're comfortable with the pillars that we extracted, the strategic pillars from the retreat, then I'd say unfortunately wait for the next report, which will get operational about those various initiatives.
Thank you very much for your answer. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I have another point that I would like to discuss. Given that the poverty is a major issue in our community, what does the city plan to do in 2024 to help reduce poverty in Cornwall? It seems to me that this should be one of our priorities.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. When we take a look at the pillars, and we were very methodical on the wording of the pillars. So you see things like community connections, housing, Cornwall future ready. Those words were very chosen very methodically and specifically, because I think elements like you're discussing, whether we're looking at our most vulnerable population, really needs to permeate throughout. So speaking at a high level, and again, as the CAO mentioned, we're going to see more in that secondary report. Topics like you're just describing now are going to be throughout the plan. And I think we have very engaged team that really want to support council's vision. And again, supporting our most vulnerable citizens. And you are going to see that permeating throughout the report.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Another aspect that I would like to discuss with you, it's about Akwesasne. I was wondering, what project do we foresee in 2024 for our relationship with Akwesasne?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll let Katie respond, particularly for the strategic plan. And but on the specific element, if it's okay, if you could wait till my next presentation on the priorities of 2024, which highlights some of our work more practically in that regard.
Thank you. So, Councillor, I think to your point too, that come to mind, and they are highlighted in that democracy attachment, our work with the Portlands. The city works very closely with our neighbors in Akwesasne, and then the idea of the city being a hub city, right? Working more closely with our neighbors. So what I can tell you is you will see partnering with our neighbors, partnering with Akwesasne, and that work in that subsequent report.
True. Thank you very much for your answer. So I'm going to keep my question for the next report. And I think we're going to go deeply to understand what you're planning. Because I would like to discuss about or to hear you about dumpsters and quarter too, because I don't see that here. And the discussion how to improve the citizen participation to our decision-making process. So that 2 points too, I think you're going to answer me that you have more details coming, but I expect that we're going to see all those items in your next presentation.
Yeah, Councillor, just so we're, I do not want you to leave the conversation thinking that those are not captured. They are. Okay. For example, pillar number 1 is housing for all. Housing for all is our work in the planning department. It's our work on the waterfront lands. It's our work on the Portland lands. It's our work on contamination. But what we were navigating, and that was one of the criticisms of the former strategic plan, is that it struggled between strategic elements and very operational elements. So we wanted to stay true to some of that feedback from the last strategic work and really present to you not a mixity of those things, but really get an endorsement based on the tangible aspects brought through the retreat at a strategic level. What were the identified areas of what we call pillars, the fundamental, if we go back to what the mayor was highlighting before, the foundational aspects, and then through it happens that, where we're at this year, you'll have my priority, you'll have our team's priority for 2024. And at the same time, for the operational plan, there's an operational aspect to the strategic plan. You'll get a refined element for all of those details. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review prior to your term, but there used to be a mayor's task force on housing, for example. And there was a series of initiatives with a key strategy and so on. And one of the first briefings I received was from Melissa and Jamie, and it related to very tangible items out of the mayor's housing task force on objectives of where they were at and where they were at. That's how we're if council is comfortable with the pillars we're identifying this evening, then that's how we will present to council. Will be very tangible. You won't get, it won't be just high level. It'll be very focused, and we'll always relate it back to a pillar function. So all through and through will be aligned, and you're going to see the status of those projects based on that. So we needed to start somewhere. We needed to have the right foundation, the right pillars, and that's what we're presenting to you this evening.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. And I hope we're going to continue this discussion on next month. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you, Katie, for all the work you've put into this. And I've just noticed on our cover page here that congratulations is in order. I don't know if I missed it at the last meeting, but looks like you have a new title, Director of Government Relations and Corporate Strategies. So congratulations on that. I'm just noticing, like, your title seemed a little longer than usual. So I too had some concerns around where some of the concrete action items were going to fit within, like even if I'm looking at the democracy results, I'm not sure where some of these are going to fit within the higher level pillars. So I look forward to seeing what the next version of this report or the operational plan looks like. I want to make sure that we see everything that was discussed within that plan, so that nothing is missed, nothing is forgotten. So I look forward to seeing that. I have some suggestions, comments, I suppose. Maybe we can discuss as we go. When it's relating to the housing for all, the first strategy within the pillar, create a favorable environment and innovation for building more homes for all age groups, incomes, and demographics. I don't know, building is a good word. I'm not sure if we can maybe discuss whether developing is an alternative word we can use. Building sounds like we want to encourage more building of new builds, basically. And there's a lot of opportunities for renovations or derelict properties and whatnot. So maybe I don't know if it's a friendly amendment if we're going that way around it. If we want to keep the word building or building and development, I just feel like maybe there's an opportunity to. Building seems like it's one thing, right? Like we're going to build more properties when there's an opportunity to do other things in terms of existing land, vacant property, vacant existing buildings. Maybe if you want to speak to that.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is actually a really great example of what we were trying to accomplish today. So taking a point like creating a favorable environment, and certainly I hear your comments on the wording. At the session on November 4th, council talked a lot about, bolstering the support of human services and the work they do around housing, looking at maybe our planning and zoning policies and densification, all of that. Those types of points will be captured in a point like number 1. So I think that's a great example. And I certainly appreciate and hear your feedback on the terminology. That is something certainly we can take a look at and change. But I think what you're doing is capturing the exact element of what we were trying to reach today.
Good. For number 3, address systemic housing barriers in our region, including financial, public, land ownership, and legal limitation. Is there an opportunity to add social as a barrier? Because we tend to think that financial is the only reason folks may be in a precarious housing situation, but there is great variety of social aspects that may unfortunately put somebody in a precarious situation, not just financial. So could we add the word social, which would encapture so many different things that our residents are struggling with?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. I think that's a great point and certainly reflective of council's discussion.
Okay. Community connections. Can you explain a little bit more about this hub city? Is this to ensure we're offering services to non-residents? In what way does this fit into what we were talking during Democracy? I just want to hear a little bit more about what hub city refers to.
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The city of Cornwall has a very interesting strategic location, right? We're very close in proximity to many of our neighbors, and we provide a lot of services to those around us. I like the term of invisible borders, right? To a lot of people that live in this general region, where one border stops and another begins, doesn't necessarily mean anything to that person. And so a lot of the services our community provides, the programming, the businesses are well utilized by individuals that may not actually live in the city of Cornwall. And I think what we mean by hub city is kind of harnessing that those elements. So whether that's working closely with our neighbors, harnessing a larger voice for working towards goals at senior levels of government. I think what we're trying to do is just like harness our role within this regional sphere. And so that's kind of what we are looking to describe in that hub city. And then again, we're going to see some of those other priority elements that council discussed within there. I have to say hub city is certainly a term that our CAO uses quite a bit, not to put them on the spot, but I think it's just kind of really well encompassing of the role that our community plays in the lives of a lot of people in this region and celebrating it too.
Beyond our borders. Future ready. So leading edge infrastructure. Are we talking about modernization? Is this, technological infrastructure? What are we talking about when we say leading edge infrastructure?
Thank you. Through you, I think that, and that's a great question. Thank you for bringing it up. We heard a lot about poising our city for future success on November 4th, and success in a lot of the elements you just described, whether that's tech, whether it's green infrastructure, what are our green practices, what are infrastructure improvements we can make to really set our city and our residents up for success in the future, modernizing for business, all of those things. So what I think we were trying to capture was all of those elements you just described. That being said, we can refine that statement a little bit more to better find that sweet spot, if you will, on those different elements.
I think the operational plan may answer some of the questions I have once I see the actual concrete action items. One more point on the future ready. Number 2, I like the use of interest holder versus stakeholder. Thank you very much for that, and I hope the corporation can continue that language going forward.
Thank you.
That's it.
Councillor Good.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Congratulations on your new position. This feels like a nice kind of summary of what we discussed, and I guess seeing it in 2 parts, you kind of have to use your imagination to fill in the blanks a bit. I think the pillars look good to me. My question is really around, there's that Democracy, we've got that fulsome list of all of these, operational activities, but it's not necessarily clear which heading will fall under which pillar, and if we're losing any of those items because they don't necessarily fit under, which items are we losing? I think that's the piece that I want to have full clarity around.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, I certainly don't want to leave council with the impression of losing any elements. And I mean, the list of Democracy items is quite lengthy. There's over, I believe it's 70 items here. So if we take a look at quality of life in the Democracy, and we're looking at very specific elements, volleyball courts, dog park study, those kinds of elements. We're probably going to, what we plan to do is kind of capture those elements together in one element of the overall strategic plan. So I would say stay tuned a little bit. We're certainly working on that report. We're taking all this feedback in from today, but definitely don't want to leave the impression that something's going to get knocked off the list, because we want to highlight council's full and robust discussion.
Wonderful.
And just to complete, Councillor, just to complete Katie's point there, one of the elements we are going to struggle is that the list is quite long. So there are prioritization. So we're intending to keep the intent of the democracy, because I think it was a valued exercise, and I saw a lot of alignment within council on those themes, which reflect the pillars. Where push comes to shove, and that's why it's important for us. The next report's important tonight on the priorities, but also for the operational plan. We are presenting to council what we feel are the most important priorities in terms of the 2024 year, and some will then go over a 2-year period, while others will remain on a list, an operational list, but will take some time to build out. Like, for example, a dog park might be easier to do, but a larger development of the waterfront needs to be broken out to achieve the waterfront plan, the master plan that's in place already. So just to give you a bit of more tangible of the aspects, we're certainly not filtering the democracy effort. We're retaining the integrity of those conversations through the operational plan. It's just that some elements will be prioritized based on financial investments, based on political consideration and existing priorities.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to cut out some of the items. Like you said, there's about 70 of them. And I think we were all just throwing out our wish list, of ideas. We recognize not everything's feasible. It's, for myself, it's a matter of just having a clarity and understanding about what the implications are for adopting these pillars, and in contrast, I guess, with some of the items that are listed in that democracy, where what I'm missing is sort of a good understanding of, again, like, I'm not suggesting that you're going to throw things out and and not tell us, but is what is not captured in this plan, or what of those discussions do you think probably won't get done in the next 3 or 4 years, which is okay. And again, like, I don't mean to infer that that's unacceptable and everything needs to be done. It's just what's not happening, what is happening, generally.
I want to give you 2 examples, Councillor, on that matter. In areas where it is not entirely our ownership. So we want to acquire waterfront lands. We're dependent on Transport Canada and those conversations. So although a pillar, although a strategy, it's been 9 years of conversations with Transport Canada with limited success on that acquisition. So might be delayed. The example from Councillor Gungjo a few minutes ago relating to the University of Ottawa. So we are in conversations with the University of Ottawa, and we're dependent on their willingness to continue the conversations to ultimately, perhaps in the near future, restart programs in Cornwall.
Yeah.
But if they at some point change their mind, we can bring them along, but it might fall off if things change, right? So I guess that's where we're vulnerable, is elements by which are priorities of council, the priorities of the organizations, but by which we, in some aspects, have limited control. We can continue to pursue, we can continue to push, but we're highly dependent on some of those partners.
Wonderful. If I can use an example that's part of there, so one of the discussions we had was around a 15-minute transit schedule. Would you see that falling, let's say, under Pillar 2 community connections, or is that future ready? I'm just trying to get a better understanding of where these items would actually fall. Because I know we're going to be getting these reports and it's going to say, like Pillar 2 references.
No, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say stay tuned, but I would see that as like a community connections piece. And maybe to provide just a little bit more context for council, I think it's probably safe to say that perhaps from a staff perspective, I worked the most with the last strategic planning document. And the one-page document that we had, that was it. It was just one page. And so I don't want to leave council with the impression that we're trying to make this more complicated than it needs to be, but taking a methodical approach and really developing a framework, I think is very important for staff to really execute and support council's vision. So I want to assure that we're going to see those elements that you just described. And I would say that the piece you just described, like an example of the bus route, would fall under a community connections piece. But I think council's really going to see the larger vision with that subsequent report and having them both in tandem.
Wonderful. Well, it's clear a lot of work went into this. It looks great. The Achieve Net Zero by 2050, I had asked, one of my close connections for some feedback on that terminology, and I'm happy that I got positive feedback on that being that is the right terminology, the right direction to go to, and that it encompasses a lot more than it sounds like. So this looks great to me, and I'm happy to be reassured by your feedback there. So thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Fred. To my heart is the university discussions that we're having tonight. Before COVID, I approached 17 different companies, school boards, teachers, and received positive responses from them that they wanted a university here. I also approached some mayors, just as an example, former mayor of Glengarry also supported it. I then took the time, this is before COVID, to go to NAVCAN, which is now DevCorps, and approached Dawn, whatever her name is, Dawn Jones. Co-Jones. And they were willing, NAVCAN was willing to take the bricks and mortar from that building and put a university course in there, and they already have courses in there. After that time, before you put your committee together, Mr. CAO, I called DevCorps, I'll leave the name out, to see if they had the same idea as NAVCAN, that they would honor a university there. And yes, they would, but we haven't got to that point yet. We're at a situation right now where Quebec is raising tuition rates, doubling tuition rates for out of province students, which is going to affect McGill, is going to affect quite a few universities that have English students. We're in a position right now where we could take advantage of that and say, come to Cornwall, come to Ontario. Where I lost the university was when I talked to the Ministry of Education, and I was bringing the information back to the former mayor, just so you know. I lost them because the province decided that they were going to take the university in Toronto, and to heck with us. Even though I pointed out the fact that we had one of the largest Francophone communities in Eastern Ontario, in all of Ontario. Eastern Ontario had more Francophone people. They didn't care. They wanted the money there. Our students who wanted to go to university here would have to go to Toronto and pay the price. Pay the price for lodging, for food, for everything, unaffordable for some of the people in Eastern Ontario. And I agree with whoever's on the committee now. This has to be done. And I will not let this go as long as I sit around this table. There are other people who have tried to bring a university to Cornwall. Ottawa took our programs from St. Lawrence. My wife actually took the psychology course out of Ottawa U in Cornwall and graduated in Ottawa. Ottawa U took those programs from Cornwall. And I can give you some reasons why. I don't want to get, anyway. You're going to hear it from me over and over. I'm not on the committee, but I'll continue to push to get the University of Cornwall. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Ms. Director, I guess is the official term. So if I get this right, we're going to say, yeah, we received the report. The recommendation is to receive the report, say what any issues we have with the report, and you're going to go back and come back with subsequent reports outlining, I'm going to assume, some kind of an action plan, specific items. We can do this by this date, we can do this by this date, we can do this by this date, all in an attempt to achieve each prospective pillar. Is that making sense? Okay. When we get to the democracy results, am I to understand that administration is going to kind of establish the priorities based on the nuts and bolts of trying to make this work? So, for example, it's fine to say let's have a university here, but in terms of a priority over 3 years, that may or may not be realistic because, as you, Mr. Say, already pointed out, that's not something we necessarily, it's not like we cut a check for $1 billion and build a university tomorrow. We are contingent upon provincial approvals and potential other schools. So you're going to establish what's realistic. Administration is going to identify, we can do this year, we can do this year. Sure, it's nice to have these other things, but these are the practical things we can realistically achieve over the next 3 years. Is that what these subsequent reports are going to tell me?
Correct. The operational plan will be one report. It will capture the entire list of priorities, and there are elements by which a date might not be fixed. University is an example because we're not dependent. We're not in the driver's seat. But there are other areas which will align more with the next report, the Priority 2024, which will be very tangible. We shall, I'll because I have it in front of us. The third item is the dog park, right? So we can tangibly say, here are the steps to get to a construction of a dog park. We have to fund, we have to consult, and we can start it on this date, and we can deliver on that date. Right. That's the type of information you'll see. There will be, in the reports that Katie and I will continue to write, will be some context to what we're writing, but ultimately you will see a chart with the listed items and the list where they stand on a priority setting and where are the milestones.
Right. So as an example, I can realistically think that we could create our own compost program. We're not dependent on anybody else. Maybe I suppose you might want to lobby for some provincial funding or whatever to maybe get it up and running, but that's something we could conceivably do without anybody. As an example of something that's, maybe it isn't, but to me it's something that I think we could achieve in-house. Is that making some
Councillor,
sense?
you've obviously read my 2024 priorities. We have an obligation to be ready for 2025. So, yes.
Fair enough. With your indulgence, Your Worship, just one aside on page 55 for us paper people out there on the democracy. Mr. Fothrop, with regards to transportation, the 4 items that are identified there, those are kind of specifically going to be addressed through our transit master plan, right? So as an example, that could kind of almost be taken right off the list because we're already kind of doing that, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, each of those 3 items, 3 of the 4 listed under transportation will be included in our transit master plan that we're planning on completing this upcoming year.
Okay. So, just as an, for the record to you and to administration, the report is great. It has lots of nice, feel-good sort of stuff. I'm really more interested in the nuts and bolts of, this is all fine and dandy, but I'm really more interested in how all of these things are going to get off the ground, what can and can't be done in a realistic 2 to 3 year time frame. So I have no problem receiving the report, but quite candidly, I'm more interested in what's potentially coming forward. Thank you, Your Worship.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, because it is very important. I do think, when we're in real time, like as we are this evening with a report in front of you, you really want to get, and I appreciate the level, the conversation on the operational elements. But we have to keep in mind, like, if the public wants to know how we started the strategic plan 5 years from now, they can look back to this date and have the democracy as one of the documents that's attached, and the pillars, and then the following council have the operational plan and start the evaluation. So I can appreciate all that councillors are saying relating to the tangibility of those elements, but we needed to start somewhere, and this is our first step.
With a follow-up, Your Worship, I understand there's a certain sense of steps that need to be adhered to, and I can appreciate that administration doesn't want to go off and say, let's embrace this, and we say, well, that's nice, but that wasn't the most important thing. We wanted you to focus on this instead. So I get it, and I'm just giving you the heads up that I probably have more to say about the following reports moving forward.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you, both of you, for these, actually 3 reports in succession. I think that work very well together. And I don't think I've ever thought so much about strategic plans as I have this week, going through this weekend and a couple days last week. And I'm really kind of unhappy with our use of the word plan in strategic plan, because I think plan kind of suggests operational things. And to my mind, a strategic plan is like a goal, an aspiration, a desire, an objective that should be overarching. Like, net zero by 2050, that's not the plan, that's not how we get there, but it is the goal. So given my dissatisfaction with those terms, if we have another hash out, well, we won't next year, will we? Anyway, if I'm around again when we discuss strategic plans again, I'll try to change the terminology, because I would like to think that the strategic plans that we aim for go beyond 4 years. I mean, they speak to the really intensely important values that we try to advance through everything we do. And I would sure hate to think that if something's not on our strat plan, for example, then it means it's not our concern for the next 3 years. So let's not accept a time limitation to anything that we aspire to do. If it's not in the plan, we can't do it. No, that won't be so. So there are some things in your priorities that are not in the strategic plan, and honestly, I think they're gross omissions. Like, as a council, if this is our strat plan, I want ownership of a commitment to truth and reconciliation and the 94 calls of action, and it's not there. Now, I know it's in the democracy, and I know it's in your priorities, but it's bigger than anything else on that strat plan that's there now. It's the biggest thing ever, and it's not just on us, it's all Canadians. And so let's find a way to squeeze it in. And maybe even make it part of our vision statement or our value statements that you say that they're going to come down to us later, because they really go beyond a strat plan. That's part of being Canadian these years. Since 2015, that's number 1. So I hope we can somehow build that in, because I know you're going to come back with a report. And a couple of questions. You do say here on page 50 that you've given us these pillars with the objectives, but management has adopted a new elevated approach, and this will anchor individual priorities to a larger set of strategies. Please, what's this elevated approach? What's the larger set of strategies? Because I'd like it kind of to be spelled out before I approve it. You know, I'm going to be voting on this. What am I voting on? What is this larger set of priorities and the elevated approach?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for bringing up that comment. That sentence that I wrote was specifically keeping in mind our previous strategic plan and how we approached it. So as I mentioned before, council's last, and I agree with you on the word plan. The last exercise council undertook was more of a list of priorities, some strategic and some not as strategic, more objectives council wanted to reach. They weren't anchored to any overall strategy. I mean, we've all seen the one page and we're all very familiar with it. So what we tried to do with this one is if we look at the democracy and those really tangible priorities or the destination council wants to get to, we wanted to anchor them to a larger set of strategies or a larger set of really thoughtful approach. That's what you're seeing today. And that's what I was trying to convey in that sentence was here's your overarching thoughts, and those anchor priorities will be in the next step. So that's, I hope that explains.
But the operations are coming in the next step.
Yeah.
To my mind, that's a level lower.
So,
like, no, the how-tos, that's the nuts and bolts of how we're going to get to these plans. So,
yeah.
But anyway, I'll accept that.
So I think what the next report will do is it's going to, so you used truth and reconciliation, which I think is very important. That will be reflected in the next report. And then we're going to also have that component of measurement, that time frame component. How are we going to stay true and stay active within the priorities laid out here, as well as a communication plan. So
right.
The next report's going to be quite robust.
Yeah.
But if council had major objections or really didn't feel that this report reflected any discussion that they had, we wanted to know that before really getting into kind of those very operationalized elements.
Just to add on to what Katie's saying, Councillor, it's the beginning of the year. A lot of community members will set goals, for example, for weight loss. That's their strategy. But then they put no actions in place to get that weight loss. We call those SMART goals. So what you're going to see in the operational plans are goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realizable in time. And when we can do that, then you can evaluate us. And we can update you in saying, hey, there's reasons why we're delayed on the action plan, on the Truth and Reconciliation action plan. Here's why. Or we're delayed in accessing the lands for the waterfront. Here's why. So that's what we mean by that sentence. It's really, our objective is the pillars, right? We want to get to the pillars, the net zero by 2050. And then how do we get there is the specifics. And that's what we're going to be laying out in the next plan.
Okay, and thank you. So there's one other area that I noticed in your report on our achievements. The very first one you mentioned was modern governance, or government, I forget which word you used. And in the democracy, there were a couple of comments, like, for example, yearly council management strategic discussion and stronger communication between council and management. I think those are really good things, and I don't see them reflected. I'm not exactly sure where they could be reflected there, so I just flagged that as something that I think is really important. And I know we've had our bylaws reviewed and renewed, but I think this working of council and management together is something that we have to pay some attention to. Maybe not in the strat plan, but certainly in all our other plans. So I think that might be, oh yeah, one other thing. And this is maybe why you mentioned that on page 51 that we actually reviewed what our long-term plans were before we just went into our planning for strat plan. And then I think you mentioned somewhere that, I think it's maybe in your strategic plan, that we have to balance council's priorities with internal master plans. So there's sort of this sense that maybe if we adopt a plan today, we're going to be abandoning previous master plans. And I can't see a conflict, actually. I mean, some of our master plans, for example, renewing the public works yard, I think nobody's going to mess with that. But something like our long-term plan for the waterfront, okay, there's room, because 10 or 15 years, we might change in some way. We'll get a grant to build a beach, whatever. So I don't really see a conflict, and I'm wondering why you mentioned that. Do you perceive a conflict?
I think there are. I think there are in some areas of your master plans.
And please be specific. I'd love to know.
So I'll give you a specific, and it's a reality the finance team and the human services team and I faced recently. So you have an objective to construct new affordable housing, but we have an existing portfolio we have to manage. So we have to, based on council's priorities, do we invest more in repairs? Do we invest more in new housing? We have that $1 to spend. Where do we, because we have a debt limit. So there might be a master plan on our asset management that says, hey, you have to repair, you have to spend $3 million a year to repair the portfolio. But then you might tell us, hey, you want to, I'm throwing a number just for the example here, you want us to build 100 units a year. Those might have their own separate master plans, but at some point they might be in conflict around the funding availability.
I frankly, I can't see that because I think the province is the one who supports the work we do in managing our existing portfolio. And we rarely have the opportunity to do new builds as we are doing now. But if we ever to abandon the maintenance on our existing 1,400 apartments, we'd be like the cities of Ottawa and some of their buildings and Toronto. We'd be rat infested, flea infested. Like, I think we'd be sensible enough never to abandon our existing stock. So, I mean, seriously, I think that's just a matter of common sense. Build when we can, but you can't abandon.
Councillor, I gave you an example of a master plan and how they can be in conflict. I would hate to leave the conversation based on your example with the expectation that we have. You have a building condition assessment for your social housing back in 2016, which says you have to invest $3 million a year. You've barely spent $1.5 million every year. So that's the reality, right? There's been priorities. So I just want to be clear that there are master plans. Those are goals. They're achievable goals, but at different times they're in conflict and we have to reset priorities.
Well, I guess we must be really clear in our thinking. What's a plan? What's an objective? What's a priority? And for heaven's sake, we have to do it all, even though we don't have money to do it all. But we can't abandon, can't throw out babies with bathwater, eh? So I think that's, thanks. Thank you, I'm done.
Very quick question. Thank you for allowing me to speak again, Mr. Mayor. Kitty, you mentioned a date as to when the operational plan is to come back. I think you said January.
The next council meeting, January 22nd.
That's great. However, we're also going to have our noses deep in a budget for the next 2 weeks. Is there a chance that it can maybe be pushed another meeting so that we have time, approve our budget, and then really dig into the operational plan? Just, I don't know how everyone else feels about that. I'm willing to wait another 2 weeks to approve the operational plan because I really want to focus on budget for the next couple of weeks.
The reality is that the operational plan will have elements that are reflected in the budget. So without tying both of those areas, we're working towards alignment, right? So it's very important for us to stay within the strategic environment, which is the strategic plan, operationalize. I'm clear on the priorities that I've worked through with conversations with councillors, the mayor, senior team, and then next time we'll have the operational plan. From there, you'll prioritize, and then days after, you're in budget deliberation. So that aligns all together. If we separate those too much, then you might approve something in budget. We'll say, well, wait a minute, we haven't prioritized that yet. So I actually think they work hand in hand.
I probably should have taken my vacation in January instead of over the holidays, but I don't know if there's anyone else who feels the same way. If it's not worth a motion, I'll drop it here. But for those of us that are working, January is a heavy month. Yeah, anyways. Anyone else?
Are you looking to make a motion, Councillor Hebert?
My
might as well try. Like, if it fails, it fails. I just think that we have a really big budget ahead of us. Regardless, I think we're going to approve a budget that's going to be in line with the priorities that we're going to approve. I mean, we already have basically the skeleton of what our strategic plan is going to look like. So why don't I try a motion to receive the operational plan at the first meeting in February?
Seconded by Councillor McDonald. Okay, we're debating this motion. I do have Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. This is a great report. I enjoyed reading it. But at one point, when I got to page 56, events, arts, and culture, was Great Wolf Lodge. What has been important to our city in the last few years is DevCore. And I don't see it anywhere in the report. And the reason that I bring that up is they've been important to our community, and their future projects are going to be important to us. So I'd like to see DevCore fit in either events, arts, or culture with Great Wolf Lodge, if we could do that. But at least that company has to be acknowledged. They're too important to us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The Dotmocracy is it is a reflection of what was discussed on November 4th. So that this is a list of exactly what was discussed verbatim, if you recall the way it was arranged. So that's why these are the elements that are represented in this attachment.
I just felt it was missing. It's such an important company to this city that we shouldn't be leaving them out. If they're going to come to us with projects at some time. Anyway, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I have a speakers list going. So next on my speakers list is Councillor Good.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Mayor. I totally appreciate the intent of the motion, and I agree that it's a lot to kind of jam into a short period of time. And as someone who's also working full-time, I totally am mentally preparing for just being completely burnt out by the end of January. That being said, I really do see these as being two things that need to be discussed in tandem. And I think if we wait until after our budget before we approve the operational plan, it may very well change the operational plan that you present. And so understanding the administrative work that goes behind preparing that, and then understanding that it will have consequences and implications for that plan if we approve a budget that doesn't necessarily include the things that have been identified. I see them as being together. So I don't plan on supporting it unless someone's got a really convincing, compelling reason why. Do you anticipate, like, for the operational plan, are we talking like a 50-page report, or are we talking like a 15-page report?
I don't know the exact numbers, but I would think it's more in line with 15 over 50.
All right, that's reassuring. All right, thank you so much.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against the motion, Your Worship. One of the problems I've had with councils over a 32-year span is it always feels to me like we take too long to do things. We talk about ideas and plans and vision. We want to get this done or that done. And I mean, we look at projects. It took the library 27 years to evolve. Talk about the Arts Center, 25 or 28 years or whatever, from the time somebody kicked it around to the time that and we're not even there yet. The Benson Center, the rinks were shot and we lollygagged forever. And so I don't really want to defer and put off. And I know the sense is, well, it's only a couple weeks, but that's kind of the mindset that seems to kind of pervade a lot of the things we try to do. Well, it's just a little bit longer, and a little bit longer becomes a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And I think that our CAO has already expressed that the two work hand in hand. I don't need to ask him the same question over again. I trust his judgment on these types of things, and I think that I would rather be faster than slower when it comes to getting on with these projects, because they take a while. Even if we voted in favor and said let's do this tomorrow, it still takes a while. You've got to, come up with the schematic and tenders and all of those things. So waiting another couple weeks is just more time that doesn't get to what I want to do. So I'm not going to support the motion. I realize there's a lot of reading. We have our budget now. It's already available. So certainly we could start perusing through that and asking our administration questions if we want to be proactive and try to get ahead of it a little bit. So certainly there is that. I mean, I have a full-time job as well. It's just the nature of it. So I'm going to vote against it because I want to push ahead. Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion, and I don't see any conflict between the budget and operations that will be proposed there and the operations that will come in to elaborate on the pillars in our strategic plan. The strategic plan is not going to be a document that we're going to use to say, no, you can't do that in the budget because of this, and vice versa. They're two separate documents, so I think we can afford to wait a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Councillor Sabri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm supporting the motion. And there's been a few analogies going around this evening, and someone made mention to a house foundations and that stuff, so I might stay with that. You can't build your foundations if you don't know what your money is and that. In that respect, I look at the budget, and to me, each and every year, the budget is the strategic plan for the council and that. If we are mindful, because I went through my first budget last year at the municipal level, I was always mindful what we were voting on by way of various items on the budget was helping us to achieve the goals of the strategic plan. I haven't had a chance to start reading this yet, but given the discussion that from the documents that we received this evening, mindful of the day that we spent in November, I thought that this budget, and I expect that this budget, will reflect an awful lot of that information. So I'm of the opinion that as I study the budget and I keep the strategic plan goals in mind that we discussed, and that for those reasons, I have a clearer indication as to where we will go and what we will actually attain in our year-end report when the CAO comes back to us, and possibly the mayor, with the recap of the accomplishments of the direction from council to the administration. I will be able to say that this budget is what delivered it. And at the same time, having had the challenge of wordsmithing various documents on various reports, I think Kate will find it extremely easy to put a document together when you have a clear indication as to what the financial goals are, achieving the documents outlined. And for those reasons, I think putting this in play a few weeks after a budget is delivered and passed would be far more practical. There's one other thing. I might have a vested interest in this. I'm not going to be around for the last 3 days of the budget. I had raised that with the mayor before. We'd asked about the possibility of changing the budget timeline for the last 3 days. The mayor informed me he's discussed it with the CAO. It's not possible. I'm sorry. My plans and what was happening at that time was set a long time ago, but at least this way, I still know I have input on 2 aspects of the direction of the council. That's why I'm voting for the motion.
Further discussion? Okay. Do we need clarity on the motion? Do we need to get the motion read, please?
The motion is to receive the operational plan of the strategic plan at the first meeting of February.
Okay, we're all clear on that? Okay, all in favor?
Okay, I won't wrap up then.
My apologies. Councillor Weber, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just thank you for those who will be supporting. I didn't mean to get into a big debate. I just thought we may want to put some real thought into the work we're doing with this strategic plan and the budget. I'm really sorry to hear that you won't be joining us for the deliberations. I think this is in my, maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but I think in my 9 years around this table, it's the first time we weren't actually offered several dates to choose from. We were just kind of like scheduled dates, so I've had to change quite a bit of commitments as well, so I'm really sorry you won't be joining us. Hopefully you can really share in those first few days. But I just really think that all of these pieces are so critical that we need enough time to really digest them before we come to the table. And I think our priority for January is the budget. That's it. Now we can vote.
Just a point of clarification, Councillor Hebert, we haven't canvassed for dates since our first term. And that's when budget cycle took us into June, so we stopped doing that. So they've been assigned since that time. Okay, are we all clear on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion is defeated. Okay, back to the main item for discussion. Is there any more commentary on the report? Yeah, I need direction from council. There's a recommendation. If someone wants to move it. Councillor Bennett, are you moving the recommendation? Is there a seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth? Final round of discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Carried.
Our next report on the agenda is the 2024 priorities, with the action recommended that council receive this report.
Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, this evening, this will be my final report. I want to give you the context to the creation of this report. It's based on senior management priorities, your priorities, the mayor's priorities, as well as things that I've heard from stakeholders, from yourselves, and from senior management teams. So it is not encompassing of the strategic plan, but it did keep in mind the conversations through the strategic plan this fall. And it also puts in place a lot of the elements that are presented in this year's budget based on the priorities you've shared with me on our one-on-ones and in your various conversations in the latter part of 2023. So I'll present the priorities, and I want to preface by two elements. One is these will change. These are the goals for us so that our senior management team and their teams can work collaboratively with council on those projects. They will evolve in two ways. One is there might be elements that would be senior levels of government who decide priority funding, which will reprioritize what is a priority, but also emerging priorities. If there was an emergency like the encampments, and we need to adapt and be responsive and develop a winter housing plan, we will. So I want council to evaluate us. It's the tangible projects that we want to advance as a senior management team, and we want. We're looking to bring alignment. We're looking to bring transparency to the work that we're doing at this table to the public. And we want to be evaluated on that. And we will present an update quarterly so that you know the status. And obviously, it will align with the strategic plan, overall operational plan, but be the yearly priority. So a couple of elements. Obviously, we have some compliance obligations that are often taken for granted, but take a lot of work. I've seen it, for example, with Tracy relating to the audit. We have a new auditor, KPMG, and the amount of time that it takes for the engagement to be compliant, the building condition assessment that's starting this year. So there's a number of areas, the asset management planning, some of our waste management. There's a lot of compliance obligations that we have that need to continue and need to be going back to some of the conversation this evening are really fundamental to our obligations as a municipality, particularly as it reports to provincial obligations. The strategic priorities we talked about, obviously, it's operationalizing those and starting to get into a flow of execution and prioritization, particularly from senior management. In infrastructure renewal, as you know, there are a number of infrastructure priorities. And what we need to do is really focus in on some of those priorities. They're in your budget ultimately, which will be debated later this month, but examples that are in front of us are the EA for Brookdale, Marlow reconstruction, the Nick Kaneb extension into the business park to support that expansion of the roadway to, for example, the Great Wolf Lodge as it happens. So those are important infrastructure expansion and renewal projects for this coming year. Obviously, there are financial constraints. Tracy, since our early meetings, highlighted our limitations, and I've heard from members of council concerns around property tax increases, concerns around a debt, the percentage of debt, the payment of the debt. So we need to continue to look at all the financial tools we have, particularly on the infrastructure front, particularly on the new affordable housing front, to leverage some of the untapped potential. And Hub City, Katie reflected on a word that I've started to use. We're the Hub City. How can we strengthen our collaboration with partners in a meaningful way that is sustainable and that is good value to the city and residents of the city, while having a more engaged and thorough conversations with our friends, neighbors, and partner cities, partner municipalities. Next slide. Modern government, second time, or maybe even the third time I've used that this evening. One of the strategic pillars that you've just approved is employer of choice. Employer of choice starts when we named our interim GM for the period, and it extends into our role of recruitment, retention, and culture in the organization. There's a lot of work to do this year. We have the right leader leading those efforts, and it will implicate the entire organization at the entire management level. Truth and Reconciliation Action Plan. There's a lot of great collaboration across the organization with the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. Those are done in good faith, but they're not rooted, to the councillor's earlier point, in the 94 recommendations. I'd gone through that exercise in my former role with the City of Ottawa. Out of the 94 recommendations for the City of Ottawa, there were 14 where the municipality could advance. I think there's an opportunity this year to develop that action plan, tie it into our engagement, tie it into our EDI efforts. So we propose to conduct the review this year. Emergency preparedness. Through a tabletop exercise that we conducted late in the year with the mayor and the various emergency service partners and infrastructure, we did what would happen if our city's water intake was compromised. And there were a number of wonderful discussions and lessons learned through that exercise. I want to make sure that the organization is preventative, is also ready for when an emergency happens. We've seen it with council on just communication for the winter housing plan as an example of, the different type of emergency than the water intake, but similar type. So I want to work with the team in supporting the emergency preparedness. Francophone services, we had a direction from the mayor on September 25th relating to a scan of what are our services. The clerk is working on a report that will come to council, if not next council, the one after, where you're going to get a snapshot of the services we can provide to the francophone community. Je vais le répéter en français, je pense que c'est important. Le maire avait bougé une motion devant le conseil en septembre qui parlait de l'offre de services à la communauté française, particulièrement au niveau des services de première ligne. La greffière a mis de l'avant un scan à travers les différents groupes de la ville, puis on a un aperçu de ce que l'on offre comme service à la communauté francophone. Ça va nous donner une meilleure idée de ce qu'on fait bien, puis ce qu'on peut améliorer, puis ce que le conseil aussi souhaite voir comme évaluation. As you know, and as you appreciate, because I've had conversations with all members of council, we spent close to $2 million of external legal services in 2023. There's an opportunity to bring our own legal DNA within the organization. It doesn't mean that we won't require external services, we will. But there is an opportunity to build that capacity in-house, save money, be strategic about our legal scan and legal risks. So there is an opportunity. It is presented in this year's budget. Customer service, I heard that from many members of council, the importance of, at the senior team, being responsive, but also for me and for different functions of the organization, how do we intake a complaint? How do we ensure that the complaint meets a standard? How do we support training and the team? So we're very fortunate the IT services is ready to put in place the right environment so that we can intake by the end of the first quarter our complaints process and establish the right level of standards. We will track that with you. In terms of governance practices, I think there's an opportunity. I keep hearing different feedback of contractors did this or the city's doing that and so on. And I think that can be, bring some governance around it with a proper fraud and waste line environment. So I think there is opportunity to create that audit function within the clerks and with external services to capture community feedback on our contracted services and on the city's effort. Artificial intelligence is not something of the future, it is current. If you go on ChatGPT, you could get an essay written. I can promise we didn't do that for our reports. And I look to some of the members of council who see reports from students who might question that. But with all kidding aside, I think there's a huge opportunity to set up the organization to be AI ready, to do some of the data analysis to support our senior management team. Our senior management team works extremely hard, and we need to support them. And as we're limited by our ability to increase the workforce to support them, we need to have that data in hand. And AI can provide us those tools. So Louis and the team and even senior management and the skills matrix that we're looking for is we want to be AI ready, and we want to do a number of pilot sites, pilot initiatives this year. Midterm governance, that's your work, that's the clerk's work, that's our work to make sure that you have the right committee structures, that we're able to continue our journey of good governance practices. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to modernize government. Residents at hand have those tools to order from Amazon and they expect the same in government. And we won't correct all of the progress that we won't see the full length of investments, but I think this year we can take a big bite in terms of what we can do in modern governance with the initiatives you're seeing on the screen. Next slide. On a vu récemment les enjeux puis les discussions au niveau d'une seconde entrée pour l'eau à boire, le risque, les efforts de notre équipe de l'infrastructure et des élus, particulièrement du bureau du maire, à lobbyer les élus provinciaux pour avoir des fonds ont débuté, mais il faut vraiment avoir un résultat cette année. C'est un risque qui est immense. On a de l'infrastructure qui vieillit. C'est un service qui est essentiel pour tous nous autres. On est dépendant de logement, on est dépendant de l'eau. Il y a des services essentiels dans nos centres de soins de longue durée, à l'hôpital, pour vous, pour qu'on puisse consommer de l'eau plus potable. Donc, c'est une priorité extrême. Infrastructure investments, there's a number of them. You know, you'll see them listed through the budget presentations on our capital program. Transit services, as Michael highlighted earlier, and based on Councillor Hollingsworth's question, there is a transit master plan, which will look at a number of initiatives, the 15-minute service, update to service, the on-call if there's an opportunity, the Sunday service. So we'll untangle all of that this year with engagement to the public in advancing that. As you know, we have renewed obligation to greener waste. So again, some of those practices you're well aware. You've gotten reports late in the year, but it's important for us to advance and execute on those this year. And they're not small things; they're big things. They're big things. Going to the green bin and the organics and making sure that plan is fully operationalized through this year is so important. And there's important infrastructure project, as you're well aware. There's construction underway for the Municipal Works Building, which sets out the next generation for those services. The Arts Center, which we've talked a few times this evening, and the Fire Headquarters, which is another important asset not to neglect. Those services are vital. Their operations 24/7, 365 days a year, and need to be modern. Next slide. On the housing front, the pillar is housing for all, and we can continue along the journey of making sure we can work with the private sector, making sure that we're doing our diligence to invest in the existing portfolio, invest in the expansion, and updating our master plans. What you're seeing on the screen is obviously the work that's ongoing for this year for the Pitt Street and the Mooresburg housing projects. The discussions on the potential of inclusion of housing along the waterfront, particularly with our with our partners, the co-owners at Portlands, but there are other areas as well to update the plan. We found ourselves with an emerging priorities with the winter housing plan, and Melissa and the team want to make sure that council, that we work early, that we're organized, and there's a number of conversations. Obviously, Massey Place being top of mind to prevent the urgency in which we found ourselves in the fall. And then there's a zoning review. Council's talked to us about heights and density. There's a lot of work and considerations for that this year. Next slide. Final slide. A community needs to celebrate, a community needs to gather, it needs to interact, and we want to do that by supporting local events. You heard from 2 presentations this evening that were empowering. I think there's an opportunity to strengthen those partnerships, to strengthen those objectives, to make sure that we see more events. There's a lot of great events. There's a lot of marquee events that are hosted yearly. But what are we doing for emerging events? How can we try things? How can we pilot? How can they animate our downtown? How can they animate our parks? How can we celebrate the city we're in? The Great Wolf Lodge we put on there because we're confident, although not announced, we're confident that that project could advance with, fingers crossed, eminent provincial funding, we hope. It's not been confirmed, but we're confident in the discussions, and that's obviously we hear it everywhere on the potential of what that will bring to our city, and the potential of improvements to parks. And I don't want to. I don't want to belittle the point, but I do think it's important when you think of important community. I talked earlier in your accomplishments on community partnerships. Park of Hope comes to mind in this year. Our ability to showcase public investment, private fundraising, community support for inclusion, accessibility initiatives, and no better place than do it in your local parks. To gather neighbors and allow them to support each other, to attend, to go in the parks and imagine the untapped potential. So those at a very practical level are what are the emerging priorities that I'm setting out for myself and senior management. You'll see all of those are pending your later in the month approvals of budget. If they change based on budget, I'll come back with an updated report. My plan is to do a quarterly touch point. I recognize there's some of these, for example, employer of choice. We're not going to, it's not turnkey in 1 year. It's a sustained conversation. But there are initiatives that we can take on this year that are tangible, that get us a step closer to that, to being an employer of choice. So again, very tangible things. Some of the things are evaluated within the year and will be transparent and reporting on those. Others will take over a period, but we'll reflect that in our first update at the end of the first quarter of 2024. Mr. Mayor, that's the presentation.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, comments, get a motion to receive on the table, please. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Ngunjo. Questions, comments? Councillor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've answered a few of my questions. I am a user of AI, big fan of ChatGPT, but I also know that it does still need a human to work with what it kind of pops out. I want to make sure that when we are talking about implementing AI into the city's work, that it won't eventually result in job losses. So probably not something that can be answered right now, but that does concern me. The infrastructure and environment, couple of things. Oh, right, I was going to ask about the conducted transit service review, and I thought, don't we have a master plan? Then I Googled it, and that was approved in 2017. So is this the plan? We're moving forward with a new master plan? Okay, great. City Hall building, elaborate, please.
We, this council within this term will not be changing City Hall, but it is our diligence in management and the mayor and I to look at what the future of City Hall looks like, the current building from an AODA perspective. And from a workforce perspective, we have, for example, more and more office spaces in a complex that's meant for recreation. We have aging sites for which we're struggling. I see it every day. So is there a location, a building where a new city hall can be located? It won't be in 2024, but we can do the scan of what this building needs for the next 10 years to be accessible, to be safe for the mayor, for the clerks, for the CAO, for council, for the public. And then is this location in the long run? And if so, if this location ends up being through that analysis, we'll take a look and plan the investments for this location. So we're certainly far from having made conversations, but I want to be transparent that it is important. Members of council always want to focus on investments in the community. It's part of your DNA, right? Helping your community. But we wouldn't do ourselves a favor if we didn't plan for what the future of City Hall is like, and no decisions will be made without providing what will happen at this site for the next 10 years for sure, and then what are potential sites that we would consider. Some of the early work has begun, but we have nothing to share more than that this evening.
Okay, as long as we're not jumping the gun right away, right? And then just, I guess, a comment, acquiring land along the waterfront to advance housing. Yes, and other things, right? So I think when we're talking about acquiring any land on the waterfront, I think we need to make sure that we're including community space and commercial space, and that when we're having any conversation about acquiring any land, it is not strictly around housing. I think we've had many conversations with our residents and how they believe, as far as I'm concerned, that the waterfront has a purpose, and that purpose is to be, for the most part, community space. Obviously, there's room for a little bit of housing because we have a lot of waterfront, but I want to make sure that the priority isn't just popping a bunch of apartment buildings along the waterfront and calling it a day, that it is complementary to significant improvements for community use, parkland, and all the great things that we see in our waterfront plan, and sprinkle it with some housing. Just some thoughts, not a question. That's it.
Further questions, comments? Councillor McDonald.
So regarding your remarks on the new city hall, in the past, we've talked about a new police station. Is that off the radar screen now, and we're going to go for a new city hall first, or is that still one of our plans? I mean, it's been demonstrated to be inadequate apparently.
I would say the police chief is to come and present this year's budget at the later in January, and that's a great question for the chief and the board chair.
Okay. But I mean, it used to be one of our priorities, like we had it flagged as something we were going to do. So anyway, when she presents, we'll know. So thanks for mentioning Eternal Legal Services. I was going to ask you what they meant, but I guess when we have budget, we'll know what you mean by that, what the game plan is for internal legal services, you know.
Yeah, so most cities have a legal team. I've been in conversations with various CAOs and legal services in different municipalities. There are kind of two main aspects: litigation and labor relations. And we rely entirely on external resources. So having a director of legal services with an assisting clerk to begin to filter some of that work and prevent every time you need legal
Yeah.
scan to go external.
So we'll be expanding our workforce. We'll be, yeah.
The proposal is to
Okay.
expand workforce, which is, in this case happens to be a cost saving.
Thank you. And then, what do you mean by elevated governance on page 59? These initiatives will be supported through reviews and modernizations of policies, procedures, and elevated governance. Kind of speaks to those elevated elements in the strategic plan that I wasn't too sure what they meant.
Councillor, which page is it on?
Page 59. I have it circled here.
So the interim GM of Human Resources has begun his audit, and there are realities that are complex relating to our current status for compliance for policies and procedures, for which we have to do a lot of work. We've begun that work, and we're confident that throughout the year we can achieve our compliance with some of those obligations.
So where does the elevated governance come in?
Around how those policies are updated and around their applicability, because right now the standards are not clear across the organization.
And we're going to be in that loop, I hope?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, that's all.
Further questions, comments? Councillor McIntosh.
One item, the legal services, I always thought, I was always against that, but in 9 years, going on 10 here, it's the first time I've heard the legal bill mentioned around this council table. It was always, you had a better chance of getting into Fort Knox than getting what the legal bill was. So thank you for that. That opens the whole new thinking on what you suggested with the legal services. It does make sense considering that huge bill, the big Ottawa having a $40 or $50 million bill. Not on our priority list is the police station. I just want to comment on that. They have thrown out the figure of $50 million. That's what they made public. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Tracy, where do they get the money for this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the infrastructure for police services is the responsibility of the municipality, and for the city to build a building at that value, we would have to borrow for it.
Would that put us very close to our limit, considering what we have to borrow with the public works buildings and all these other things going on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, definitely it would put us not close, but over our internal limit of 10% of own source revenue, but not yet at the provincial limit of 25% of own source revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. CEO.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to come back on an earlier point just to clarify. The City of Cornwall does not own its waterfront. So the spirit of my description around the acquisition of the waterfront reflects on one aspect the waterfront master plan that's developed and still very current. But on the other portion, Transport Canada has clearly highlighted that they have the intentions to transfer the lands to Canada Lands Corporation. In large urban centers, that is generally okay. We see that in Ottawa, we see that in Montreal and Vancouver, where land is transferred to Canada Lands Corporation. They do all of the work on urban planning and servicing, and then they parcel out a portion of it for affordable housing. In the context of Cornwall, for Melissa's team and for council's objectives on new affordable housing or housing altogether, that won't work. So that we have objectives in the waterfront as a city is one thing, but because we're not the property owner in this case, Transport Canada, might just transfer it to Canada Lands Corporation. And if we're not clear about our intent, if we don't update our plans, then we can't have those conversations. So that's what I mean when we're talking about housing waterfront, is we have some work to do around that this year. And Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank the councillor for the question. It is my commitment and our entire senior management team's commitment that we will continue to modernize government in using tools that are available to us, including AI. Yes, that might change job functions, but it will not be a driver of job loss. We, in our organizations, could increase by 100 FTEs and still not have the type of data that allows us to do the most evidence-based decision-making. So we can leverage AI in that context to support our finance team, to support our housing team, to support our infrastructure team. We are not embarking in that space to, yes, there'll be maybe over time a prioritization of where the allocation of resources are, but it's not a resource reduction initiative.
Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth is next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to turn this into a budget deliberation ahead of time, so I'll keep my question till later. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sabri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm kind of following up on a comment from Councillor McIntosh with regards to the not knowing the legal fees. I seem to think, and I can prove me if I'm wrong here, but it's a bit of an abnormally, the amount of legal fees this community has had, or this city has had. And I hope that within the budget information, we are going to actually see a breakdown of the legal fees over the number of years, so we can actually come to a little bit more of a solid conclusion with regards to internal legal services. I know in large municipalities, yes, they might have litigation, they might have labor, but they also have environment lawyers, they also have various other lawyers with regards to planning practices and everything. It's very much, like they're not a boutique law firm. They are a very sequestered law firm with regards to all their areas of legal service. One other comment, artificial intelligence. I know that's the catchphrase of the next several years and that stuff. I'm just going to say that, as always, it's incumbent upon council to provide the natural sensibility to it.
Councillor Ngunjo.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. A quick question. Regarding AI. Please, do you have any example or history that you know about a municipality using AI? Can you share something with us? Do we have any?
Absolutely, and thank you, Councillor. It is emerging, evolving, and I don't want you to think it's a perfect model, but we are piloting it this year, and I hate to put Melissa and Louis on the spot, but they're working closely with the province on an initiative that we can share, which will be one of the evaluation points for us in the AI space this year. So I don't know.
Sure, thank you, Mr. CEO. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Essentially, AI is just about everywhere, right? I mean, if you think about any phone you have, you push that, that speech-to-text button to say, hey, make me a grocery list. That's AI right there and there, right? So what we're looking at accomplishing is, to Mr. CEO's point, is leveraging AI to augment what our current staffing complement can do. So in the human services case, there's a lot of requests that come in. How do I apply for this? Where do I go? And that takes a lot of effort to respond to that. Now layer on top 50+ languages from asylum claimants. You still have to respond to their needs. So how do you do it in a timely fashion, in a way that they can be comfortable you do it from their phone. You do it from a kiosk, you do it from a website, but you do it by leveraging AI. And what the AI is going to do is not replace the human, but it's going to work off of a vetted knowledge base of documents, of our procedures, of our application process, of what to do, and then respond back to the person in their language of choice to say, hey, this is how you apply for a transit pass. This is where you have to go. And if at the end of the interaction, it gets to a point of, I really need to speak to a human, then that human already has all of the history of the conversations and now is in a much better position to have a positive interaction with the citizen about the question that they have. So it's not about replacing the human, but it's about allowing 24/7 access to city services, to city questions, response, answers, using the knowledge base that we vet and provide. So it's not just going to pull from Google to say, here's how you do this, a la ChatGPT, for instance. It's going to be through our data set that we provide. And that will then free up human services staff to do the work that they're meant to do, the more elevated work, to use that word again, that they could be focusing on.
Thank you very much for your answer. Quick question related to what you said. Are you expecting doing or making staff getting like formation or studying or to understand how AI? I'm not saying that staff is not doesn't know about AI, but do you have any training in the whole process that you want to install? Are you considering adding some training for the staff? Is it included in?
Councillor, thank you for the question. The short answer is yes, absolutely. There are three large players in the AI space: Facebook, Google, Microsoft. We have a privileged relationship through procurement with Microsoft services. So Louis is engaging with their team on how we can equip different leaders in the organizations with AI for government and how that makes sense. Obviously, this is a pilot amongst the potential, if you will. So this year we'll have a better landscape of what the next milestones will be for us. But we think that this pilot is refreshing, it's an opportunity, and we'll evaluate its successes or challenges prior to expanding too much. But there's a number of senior management team members and supervisors, managers, and different roles in the organization that will partake in the training through Microsoft and either post-secondary institution this coming year.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Further questions or comments? Great. Okay. All in favor of receiving? It's carried. Thank you. Madam Clerk? Yes.
The next session on the agenda is inquiries, and we have none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
The same with reports from committees. We don't have any written submissions.
Councillor McDonald?
So if we do wish to make a comment in standing committees, then we have to submit a written report first?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not necessarily. If you have an update to give us, now would be a good time.
I do.
Councillor McDonald?
Thank you. Well, my first one is a shout out to tourism. We have a new map, as you can see, for Cornwall and the counties, and it's very attractive and appealing, looking like a fun place to visit. But what I find most commendable in it is that Akwesasne is clearly delineated, and not just the territory, but the fact that there are two public places for people in Cornwall to visit. They mentioned the skate park. It's actually on the map, and so is the traveling college. And I think that's a step, because I've compared former maps and they've been absent. So very good. Kudos to our tourism department. And then regarding committees, This is another topic I'd like to explore. I understand now that all our committee meetings are going to be here in City Hall, and I'm wondering what the background to that is. This is, we've heard the phrase here tonight, that transparency is, necessary for the public, but I think sometimes it's necessary for us as councillors too. So I would dearly love to know what the thinking is behind moving all our committee meetings here to chambers.
Madam
Especially
Clerk?
since, as somebody mentioned before, we have more city departments at the Civic Complex than we do here. But anyway, I ask.
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the first reason is to make sure that governance is appropriate at all the committee meetings. So by having all of the committees under the office of the city clerk, we're going to be preparing the agendas and the minutes in a very similar fashion for all of the committees. So they're all going to look the same. They're all going to be through eScribe. So the format will be very familiar to you. Second reason, transparency-wise, is that we want to stream the meetings to the public. We've always had open meetings to the public, but by having here at City Hall and highlighting those committee meetings, then it is possible that the public can join us either online or in person to attend those meetings.
Thank you. And then my third question has to do with budget and the town hall. There was a reference tonight, the fact that we've had a town hall in the past. I think we've had two. So this first one of 2024, to my mind, is the third one, and it's slated to occur very close to the actual budget. Now, tonight, I received my budget book, and I know it took months to prepare, and we'll have meetings at the end of the month on it. This town hall that's going to occur on the 29th, what are the expectations of us? Are we to somehow maybe do a quick pivot and incorporate some of the notions that people might bring for the budget of 2024? Or is this actually long-term thinking for the budget of 2025, given that there's like a week between the town hall meeting and, how are we expected to respond? And participate even.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I'd ask both the clerk and Ms. Bailey to give the context of the town hall. We've discussed it. I think there's a robust plan. Some of our stakeholders have already been informed as they had made some budget requests. Turn over to the clerk and Ms. Bailey to add.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. The details were just finalized late Friday afternoon, so those invitations to a few organizations that had mentioned that they were looking for funding from the city will be invited personally. So at the town hall meeting, those organizations will be invited to speak and give their request for funding. And we are also asking the public its comments. So if members of the public want to share some thoughts, some ideas, this would be the time to do so.
So in the first case, are those going to be outside agency appeals?
Outside agencies, yes.
It's going to replace
So
that?
not the ones that we are legally obligated to support, but other organizations in the community. We do know of a certain amount of organizations. They will be invited, but the invitation is open for other organizations if they are looking for funding and wanted to address council. It is mostly charitable and non-profit organizations.
So, well, I've had a few people ask me about this town hall meeting, and I looked on the city website this morning. I couldn't find any reference to it because people, the word's been going out there for a couple of weeks. And, I don't figure we as a council have to be told anything first, but we have to be told it sometime.
Yeah,
because
but we
people
are-
do ask us questions.
We are this close to putting our ads up on social media and our website and letting people know. So that will occur this week.
So obviously, there was rumors started, I guess, just deliberately to start the ball rolling or whatever?
The idea was always there, but we just finalized it on Friday.
Okay. So on the city website is where people would go then to get
Yes.
what they need to know. Thank you.
Any further reports from committees? Councillor Bennett?
So I just have a follow-up question to that. The stakeholders that are going to be coming to speak to us, is this the end around the process that we've put in place as far as how outside agencies get money? Or is this so that they can talk to us before their applications go to the committee?
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the organizations that are coming to the town hall meeting are not the same organizations that are putting in an application through the municipal grants program. That's an established program. It may be those nonprofits or organizations that don't fit within that framework that are looking or seeking some support from the city.
Okay, then. That could open another can of worms.
Okay, I have Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Ngunjo.
Well, just on the town hall thing while we're there, it seems somewhat, I don't mean to be critical, but we had a group come here tonight that told us all the great things they're doing, and isn't it wonderful? Now, they were smart enough not to ask for some cash, but we know that they're going to ask for some cash. So the question is this: if each one of these groups are lobbying for tax dollars, which in essence they are, how is it fair that one group gets to come here tonight and say, wow, what a great job we're doing, and then other organizations kind of have to wait for the town hall? And how do they pitch their project and ask for money at the same time? Like, some of these groups want to tell you how great their organization is, and then they want to say, oh, and by the way, we would like some money. Fair enough. Whereas in this case this evening, this group came and said, we're really great. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to come back and ask you for money as well. So they kind of get like two kicks at the can. So I guess my question is, Your Worship, how do we regulate who gets to make presentations and then who gets to come to the... It seems kind of convoluted to me. Maybe I'm not getting the gist of it, and I appreciate that administration is trying to manage the days of just random people coming and asking for cash, because that's how it historically has been. And we say, oh, that's a great idea. Here's some money. Have a nice day. And by the way, finance manager, figure out how to make it work, okay? Because everybody's doing great work. We get it. So I get you're trying to manage it, but it seems like it's inconsistent. And I was all on board for it until this group came tonight. And then I thought, wow, I kind of a bit of a problem now. Anyway, perhaps you can elucidate me on the process and how one group gets to get two kicks and other groups don't.
Mr. CEO?
So there's been, I'll say, less clear process where groups could come and ask for funding at any time outside of any window. And one of the early works I did with the clerk and Ms. Bailey was, I don't understand, random groups can come without emergency ask and seek funding. Said, I don't understand why it's not in the budget cycle. So that's basically the direction that's been made, because that's the decision of council on the way we're going to invest our public dollars in the year ahead. Where we're struggling, and I think we're going to find the perfect spot as we enter this year, which you're going to have two budgets this year. You're going to have this one later in January, early February, and then there's the cycle in November for the 2025 budget, is that groups that we fund that want to give us an annual report will have a window to come to council, and it will be outside of the budget window. It's happened that now we're the first meeting of the year. These groups had requested, hey, we're going to give you a 23 update. Can we come? The clerk worked very hard to make sure that, the comments, to be candid, went beyond my comfort. They should not be speaking about the year ahead. They should be speaking to their work behind. They chose to go beyond that, but as you've seen in the presentation that was looked at by the clerk, did not include a submission ask, because it is a point of fairness to all the community groups. But you see the challenge we have is city and council funds groups. They want to give us an annual report. They should. we should be clear on the window to do that. But then the funding ask should come through the budget process, through the budget submission and the town hall
Right.
Process.
Now, maybe I can throw something out for you to contemplate moving forward for next year. In the days, when we first started, we would literally have a budget deliberation meeting for outside agencies to come and pitch their product. In other words, this is what we're doing, here's the amount of money we need, you get 10 minutes, whatever, and it might have taken 2 nights. The problem I have as one member is that by having it as a town hall, you let the organizations try to lobby for money, which of course they're going to try. They're trying to keep their operations going. And then you're going to let kind of random guy come up to the mic or random woman come up to the mic and sort of maybe potentially undercut without understanding the big picture. It makes it really difficult to me for these organizations to say what they have to say and then try to, we're going to open this up to a debate between the Dean Hollingsworth Society asking for some money and Jane Smith telling me I'm all completely off the mark. It just strikes me as a very, quite frankly, a kind of a muddied process this year, and I don't like that random groups just come and ask for money. I'll be the first one to say that's problematic. I've never been a fan of it. I think it's a lousy way to try to budget, and I get that administration's trying to get a handle on that, but I'm not, and I'll let it play itself out. Maybe I'll be incorrect, and maybe it'll be fine, but I don't know if the town hall format is the way that I would do it moving forward after this year. However, I'll try and keep an open mind and see how it shakes itself out, but it just feels kind of uncomfortable to me, especially in light of what took place tonight. And I would be lying if I didn't say I wasn't kind of irritated. There's other words I could use, but in public I'm not allowed. But I didn't think that was acceptable in my opinion. I could be, maybe I'm off base here, but anyway, we'll leave it. We'll see how the town hall goes, but I do have a bit of a problem with it. The way it's set up, I get the administration's trying to get a handle on this in a vacuum without any kind of thing, but it feels, anyway, we'll see. I just thought I'd express my opinion on it moving forward. Thank you, Your Worship.
I'd just like also to comment that some of these organizations, because they do receive funding from us, are required to report to us annually as well.
Yeah, sure.
I have Councillor Ngunjo next.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I think it's a first experience that we're going to have with those association. As a first experience, I'm open mind. I'm curious. I would like to see what's going to happen. Maybe we can have good experience. So I don't want to close this door right away. I would like to keep it open. But I have a question that I would like to ask to you. It's about the list of the association that we're going to invite to this town hall. What are the criteria that we're going to, because I assume that we have like 100 or 200 associations in Cornwall. I don't know. How are we going to select those associations to invite them? What are the criteria for the invitation? Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the organizations that are being invited, there's only a few, and they have indicated to us that they were looking for funding. Whether they came to council and requested funding or made a request for funding that didn't make it to council, those are the organizations that are being invited.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Has Councillor, can I invite an organization to this town hall, or is it closed?
It is not closed. It is open, but they must register.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Sabri, then Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You did touch on one point that I was going to alert Councillor Hollingsworth, and I know he knows it, that an organization that receives funding is more or less obligated to come back and report to the council on it. That's been touched on. What I'm looking at, though, is if by the end of this budget cycle, once the budget is set, if we could see the calendar for the budget cycle, which will begin in November, as I understand. And in that budget cycle, if you could indicate an appropriate and adequate time frame for presenters to make their pitch, so that I tend to sympathize with what Councillor McDonald is saying. You're doing this at the last minute, and what are the realistic chances of you actually getting it, unless someone's privy to something that some of us don't know with regards to these requests. So I think it would be far better if we have a budget calendar that is set, and that these people and the public is aware as to when they can make these applications for these funds.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of words that Councillor Hollingsworth said inspired these questions in me. You mentioned debate and you mentioned format. So I'm curious to know, apparently these people will be offered a 3-minute window to make their presentation. I hadn't thought that they would necessarily all be asking for money. I'm presuming that most of them are going to give us suggestions on how we should spend the city's money. But regardless of that, is there going to be debate? Will they simply make their presentation, or and so often we get a presentation here, we ask them to speak for 10 minutes, they do, and then we spin it out for another half hour with our questions. So is that going to be part of the format?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would suspect that a few questions may be in order, but this is not the place to debate it. It's a town hall, and there is no debate at a town hall. The job is to share information. So they're going to be sharing information with you and giving you their opinion. And council's job is to listen to that and to, save it for debate at the following day will be the budget meeting where councilors can start making motions.
Okay, so then, as a follow-up to that, is any suggestion that a person would make at the town hall meeting going to be the subject of a consequent discussion around the council table during the budget process?
So that would be a decision for council at the end of the day, realistically.
At the end of the town hall day?
No, when we reconvene for deliberations following the town hall.
We would say we'll entertain for debate numbers 3, 5, and 7, but not 4, 5, and 6?
Well, well, if council wants to fund a particular group that may not be receiving funding, a councilor can put forward a motion, and then we can
okay.
debate it. So this might harken back to when we had our separate budget committees. We had a budget committee and we had a community agencies committee. Some of you around the table remember that. It's not dissimilar from that, except in the town hall, decisions are not made. As the clerk indicated, information is received.
Right.
And questions can be asked, but no decision is made at that time.
Good. And at our previous town halls, people were not allowed to ask questions of staff. They could ask questions of councilors. And half the time, it was staff who actually knew the answers. So are we going to have that same format this time? What are the rules of the engagement?
It's going to be the same as consistent with our town hall policy. If there are questions to be asked of staff, it would happen when we reconvene.
Sorry?
If you have questions for staff following the town hall, they can be asked when we reconvene to deliberate the budget.
Okay, so we will ask the questions of staff. People.
Presenters will not be able to. No, they're addressing council.
Okay. Thank you. We'll see how it goes.
Any other questions on this topic? Okay, seeing none, Councillor McIntosh?
Did I hear right that they're given a maximum of 3 minutes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is correct.
Be a challenge.
At discretion of the chair.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I might add that the organizations, and I can't say who they are because they haven't received that invitation, but will be no surprise. They have been to council before, most of them, and they have made some kind of pitch. This is a pitch for request for funds, and that's it.
I've just been advised we will have a clock. So, okay, good. Yeah, I can do that from here. Okay, moving along. Notices of motion,
We have none, Mr. Mayor,
resolutions,
and we have none as well.
and there was no in-camera meeting for the date of January 8th, 2024.
So under the new format, Mr. Mayor, this is where we would go into in-camera session, have our session, and after that is done, we would go back into open to report.
Bylaws?
We have no bylaws, except for the confirming bylaw.
Confirming bylaw. Can I have a motion for the confirming bylaw, please? Councillor McDonald, seconder. Councillor Good, all in favor? That's carried. Adjournment, and the next meeting will be on Monday, January 22nd. We will be switching to Tuesdays starting in February. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Councillor Goodjoe, Councillor Sabrai, all in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. Merci. Niwan Kov.